The first light hasn't decided what it wants to be yet, and Jessica Nicole Davis is already moving. Not the kind of moving that looks impressive, the kind that keeps a house upright. A spoon clinks once against a mug that went cold sometime after midnight. The kitchen bulb flickers when she flips the switch, then steadies like it remembered its job. On the table, 2 envelopes from the power company, 1 from the school, 1 stamped "Final Notice" in the corner. Under them, an apartment rent envelope with only half the cash folded inside, tight as if folding it harder could make more appear. Above the fridge, where small hands can't reach, a different envelope sits like it's been put there on purpose. It's old, the paper softened at the edges, sealed, unsent. Her handwriting on the front neat enough to pass for calm, Matthew Ryan Sterling. Jessica doesn't look up at it. She doesn't have to. Her body knows where it is. In the living room, the triplets orbit one another in their own chaotic system. Michael is on his knees on the rug, tying his own sneaker and Joshua's at the same time, tugging the laces like he's fixing something that might unravel if he lets go. Joshua runs through the hallway with a spoon between his teeth, tapping it on the banister as he goes, making a rhythm just to prove the morning is real. Christopher Kitt sits on the kitchen floor with a pencil worn down to a stub. He draws slowly, pressing too hard, then pauses to rub his nose with his sleeve. When he lowers his arm, a thin smear of red glints on the gray fabric. Jessica sees it. She doesn't say a word. She reaches into the drawer, pulls out a tissue, and sets it beside him like she's placing a bookmark. Kit glances up. "Can we do pancakes today?" Jessica keeps her eyes on the lunch bags, hands moving as if she's been doing this for years, which she has. "Not today? Tomorrow?" Her fingers hesitate, just once, then they keep going. "Tomorrow." Michael watches her from the corner of his eye, not like a child watching a parent, like a small guard watching a wall for cracks. Jessica shoulders backpacks, grabs car keys, and reaches for her coat. When she steps up the 3 front steps to the porch, she pauses with one hand on the railing, breath coming in shorter pieces than it should for a woman standing still. Her other hand presses flat to the center of her chest, just beneath the collarbone, as if she's holding something in place. Joshua appears behind her, hair sticking up, cheeks sticky from juice. "Mom, where's my other sock?" "In your room, under the dinosaur." "How do you—" "Just get it." He runs. Jessica lets the doorframe hold her for half a second longer than necessary. Then she straightens, smooths her shirt where the fabric has creased, and calls, "Shoes, now." They spill out into the gray morning. As she locks the door, the old envelope above the fridge remains inside the house, sealed, untouched, waiting, like it has time. Scene 2. The ground changes. The school drop-off area is too normal for what's about to happen. Kids in bright jackets, a crossing guard with a whistle, the squeak of sneakers on wet pavement. Someone's car radio playing a song nobody listens to. The smell of damp grass and cheap coffee. Jessica kneels to zip Kit's hoodie. "You keep the tissue," she murmurs, tucking it into his pocket like a rule. Kit nods, not meeting her eyes. Michael is already half a step ahead, scanning, counting heads without meaning to. Joshua chases a friend and laughs with his whole body, spoon long forgotten. Jessica turns to answer another mom's quick question. Something about the class party, something harmless, and she hears Michael's voice behind her. Not loud, not panicked, just tight. "Mom!" Jessica pivots. Kit is standing still by the fence, his pencil in his hand like he forgot why it's there. His mouth is slightly open. His eyes aren't fixed on anything. "Kit?" she calls. 1 step, then 2. The pencil slips from his fingers and hits the concrete with a tiny click. Then his knees bend like the legs gave up their agreement with the rest of him. He goes down slow, as if gravity is pulling him through water, and the sound when his shoulder touches the ground is blunt and wrong. Jessica is on him instantly, one knee on the wet concrete. She pulls the tissue from his pocket and presses it under his nose, and the tissue blooms red, not a dot. A steady, stubborn flow that doesn't care about school mornings. "Look at me," she said, close to his face. "Kit, eyes." His eyelids flutter. He tries. Joshua skids to a stop, breathless. Is he sleeping? Michael stands frozen at Jessica's shoulder, hands balled into fists he doesn't seem aware of. His eyes lock on the tissue turning darker. A teacher yells for the nurse. Someone says, "Call 911." A stranger offers a sweater. Another mother steps back like blood is contagious. Jessica scoops Kit into her arms. He's lighter than he should be. His head lolls for a second, and she shifts him higher, tightening her hold, her own sleeve catching the blood and staining. She runs toward the car line, shoes slipping slightly on wet pavement. The world narrows to her son's breathing, uneven, thin, and the pounding in her own ears. Halfway to the curb, her vision dims at the edges for a single beat. She doesn't stop. She adjusts her grip and keeps moving. Behind her, Michael grabs Joshua's hand without asking and drags him along. No one answers Joshua's question. Scene 3. The Verdict St. Anne Medical Center smells like antiseptic and burnt coffee and plastic warmed by fluorescent lights. The ER doors hiss open. Nurses take one look at Kit's face and the blood on Jessica's sleeve and slide a gurney under him like they've done it 1,000 times. Name? Christopher Davis. But Kit. Age? 6. They're already moving him away as she says it. Jessica follows until the nurse blocks her with a gentle palm to the chest. "Mom, stay right here." The word mom lands on Jessica like permission and accusation at the same time. Michael and Joshua sit in a row of hard plastic chairs in the waiting area, small feet not reaching the floor. Joshua swings his legs and tries to make the chair squeak. Michael doesn't move. He watches the double doors like he can hold them open with his eyes. Jessica's phone buzzes once. She doesn't check it. Her hands smell like blood even after she scrubs them under the restroom faucet until her knuckles pale. The water is too hot. She keeps scrubbing anyway. When the oncologist finally sits across from her, he doesn't rush. He doesn't soften his voice. He sets a folder down between them as if it's something heavy. Your son's labs and bone marrow biopsy indicate acute myeloid leukemia. Jessica doesn't repeat the words. Her eyes drop to the papers because looking at his face feels like stepping too close to a ledge. "We need to start treatment immediately," he continues. "Chemotherapy, but based on what we're seeing, he'll likely need a transplant." Jessica signs where they point, pen skating slightly on the paper because her grip won't stay steady. She doesn't ask about money. She doesn't ask for a miracle. She asks one thing. How much is this going to hurt him? The doctor's jaw tightens in a way he can't fully hide. "We'll manage pain as best we can," he says, "but there will be hard days." Joshua leans into Jessica's side and whispers, "Can we go home after this?" Jessica's hand rests on the top of his head. Her fingers barely move. The doctor flips to another page, eyes narrowing at a different chart. "And Jessica, your cardiac history. Peripartum cardiomyopathy, stress-induced episodes. Your most recent evaluation shows your ejection fraction is under 20%. Jessica keeps her face still. Her right hand presses lightly to the center of her chest beneath the table, unseen. "For transplant," he says, "we'll look at a haploidentical donor. half match. But your boys are not candidates, and you are not a candidate for donation with your heart in this condition. Jessica lifts her eyes. Then who? The doctor pauses, just long enough for the hallway sounds to creep into the room. An overhead announcement, a cart rattling, someone laughing too loud at the vending machines like nothing terrible exists. Then he asks the question that doesn't fit inside a hospital room with 2 children and 1 mother. Where is the father? Michael's head snaps up. Not curious, alert. Joshua frowns. We have a dad? Jessica's throat works once. No words come out. The question hangs there, solid as a brick. Scene 4. The call later. The pediatric ICU hums with machines that refuse to sleep. Kit lies in the bed with tape at his arm, a tube delivering fluids, a monitor keeping time for him. His skin looks too pale under the fluorescent light. The rhythm on the screen rises and falls in steady lines that feel like a fragile agreement. Jessica sits in the chair beside him, her back straight because she doesn't trust her body if she slouches. She holds Kit's hand carefully, fingers wrapping around his small knuckles without tugging any wires. Her phone sits dark in her lap. Michael and Joshua are down the hall with a volunteer and a stack of picture books. Jessica asked for that. She said it quietly, as if she were requesting a blanket, not trying to keep 2 children from learning a sound they'll never forget. She opens her banking app. The balance stares back, small and indifferent. She closes it. Her thumb hovers over her contacts. She scrolls. The name is still there. The same way it was the last time she told herself she'd never touch it again. Matthew Ryan Sterling. Her finger stops above the screen, doesn't press. Her chest tightens in a way that makes her swallow shallowly. She turns her face toward Kit, watching the slight rise of his ribs under the thin hospital blanket. On the bedside table is a clear plastic bag with his clothes from that morning, his hoodie, his small sneakers, the tissue the nurse replaced. The hoodie sleeve still has a faint rust-colored mark where he wiped his nose. Jessica exhales through her nose. The breath stutters. Then she leans forward until her forehead touches the bed rail, cold metal against skin. She speaks into it, low, like the bed needs to hear it before the world does. Pride won't save my son. Her thumb presses the name. The call rings once, twice. Voicemail. Jessica doesn't hang up immediately. She listens to the silence on the other end as if the silence might change its mind. She tries again. Voicemail. Her mouth sets in a line that isn't pretty, isn't performative, just held. She types a message with the fewest words possible because there's no room left for decoration. Christopher, Kit, needs a transplant. You're the donor. St. Anne Medical Center. Now. She hits send. The screen confirms it. Then the phone goes still in her palm. In the corner of the room, a nurse steps in, older, steady, eyes that have seen too much to waste time. Her badge reads Diane Parker. Diane looks at Jessica, then at Kit, then at the monitor. You eaten today? Diane asks. Jessica shakes her head once. Diane places a cup of broth and 2 crackers on the table like a practical offering. Eat enough to stand, Diane says. This hallway's going to try to take you down. Jessica picks up the cracker. Her fingers tremble. She doesn't put it in her mouth. She watches Kit's monitor, waiting for any change, any sign, any answer. And somewhere far away, where glass and steel and money make silence feel safe, a message sits on Matthew Ryan Sterling's phone. Unread. The scene ends with Jessica's thumb resting on a dark screen, Kit's hand in hers, Diane's quiet presence near the door. And the question the doctor asks still heavy in the room. Where is the father? Matthew Ryan Sterling's office doesn't have noise so much as it has permission. Sound is allowed in measured portions. Soft shoes on polished concrete, The whisper of a suit sleeve when someone lifts a pen, the faint click of a glass door sealing shut. Even the air feels curated, cool, filtered, like a room designed to keep the outside world from ever getting its hands on you. Floor-to-ceiling windows frame the city in clean lines, steel, glass. Far below, tiny cars crawl along wet roads, their headlights like beads on a string. Up here, nothing crawls. Everything moves forward. A wall-sized screen shows graphs rising in patient, obedient slopes. Another screen holds bullet points, acquisition timeline, merger vote, Q3 targets. The kind of words that sound harmless until you realize what they do to people who aren't in this room. Matthew stands at the head of the table in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled to his forearms like he's ready for work that never involves touching a single human being. His voice lands in the room with a practiced calm. "We're not negotiating the schedule," he says, eyes moving across the table. "We're owning the schedule." Heads nod, pens glide. Someone slides a folder toward him as if offering tribute. At the far end, Rick Caldwell sits slightly apart, legal pad open, pen uncapped, watching the room without needing to be seen watching. He doesn't nod like the others. He just makes small marks, then looks up again. He keeps his face still in a way that suggests he's built a career around silence. Matthew's phone sits near his right hand, face down. The device vibrates once, quiet but insistent. The kind of vibration that means someone tried to reach you through layers of security. Matthew doesn't look at it. He continues, "By Monday, I want a full risk assessment and a revised offer. If we want the market to follow us, we don't hesitate." The glass door opens with no sound. Ashley Elizabeth Thorne enters like the room belongs to her in the same way the oxygen does. She's tailored and precise, hair smoothed into place, posture straight, heels that don't click loud enough to break the spell. In one hand, a coffee cup with a sleeve and a lid. In the other, a slim leather folder and a tablet. She doesn't ask permission to interrupt. She doesn't need to. She places the coffee within the exact reach of Matthew's hand, aligned with the corner of his notepad. She slides the folder open to the right page, turns it, so the signature line sits in front of him without him needing to lean. "Page 3, she murmurs, and taps the line once with a manicured nail. Matthew signs without reading. Ashley's eyes flick to the wall screen, then to the faces around the table, then to Matthew's phone as it vibrates again, twice this time, closer together. The corners of her mouth don't change. She simply reaches across the table as if she's picking up something that belongs to her, lifts Matthew's phone, and turns it so only she can. Her thumb hovers over the screen. The meeting continues in a low, controlled stream of numbers and deadlines. Ashley's thumb stays still for a second too long, as if she's waiting for the device to reveal the person behind the call. Then she turns the screen off and slips the phone into her palm like she's pocketing a loose thread before anyone notices it. Something remains unfinished in the room. A phone call unanswered, and a hand holding the power to keep it that way. Scene 2. The attempt. The first door slams shut. Back at St. Anne Medical Center, the hallway outside the pediatric ICU smells like disinfectant and warmed plastic. A vending machine hums. Someone down the hall laughs at something on a phone too loud for this place, then stops when they notice where they are. Jessica Nicole Davis stands by the wall with her shoulder against the cold paint, phone pressed to her ear. 1 ring, 2, voicemail. She lowers the phone and stares at it as if staring could change what it is. Her fingers move again, faster this time. Another call. Another ring, another voicemail. Her throat works once. She swallows without water. She types instead, short, Clean, no extra words, a message that reads like a medical chart. Christopher Kidd needs a transplant. You're the donor. St. Anne Medical Center. Now. She hits send. The message shows delivered. No reply. Jessica opens her email, finds a blank draft, and writes a subject line that makes her hands tighten around the phone. Subject: urgent, child's transplant, paternity, confirmed by HLA match need. She deletes the last part and rewrites it simpler. Subject: urgent. Your son needs you. She types 3 sentences, no pleading, no history, no softness. Then she sends it. On the other side of the city, in the sterile quiet of Matthew's office, Ashley holds his phone and watches the screen light up. A name appears. Jessica Nicole Davis. Ashley reads the message. Her pupils don't change. Her breathing doesn't change. She simply taps once, then again. Delete. She opens the email app. The subject line sits there, like a flare in a dark sky. Urgent. Your son needs you. Ashley presses and holds, selects, deletes. Then she blocks the sender. The phone goes dark again in her hand. She sets it back down on the table precisely where it was, face down, as if nothing has moved. Matthew is still talking about timelines and approvals. His hand reaches for the coffee without looking. He takes a sip, swallows, and keeps speaking. Ashley leans slightly toward him, close enough that it looks like intimacy to anyone watching. Her voice is soft, almost bored. That woman from before is trying to contact you again, she says. Multiple calls, emails. It's the same pattern. It reads like another shakedown. I handled it. Matthew doesn't ask which woman. He doesn't ask what she wrote. He doesn't ask why now. He simply nods once, eyes on the numbers in front of him. Good, he says, and signs another page. Across the table, Rick Caldwell's pen pauses for the smallest moment. His eyes lift toward Ashley's hand on the phone, then drop again to the legal pad. He makes one extra mark. The message that could change everything is gone. And the only sign it ever existed is a tiny pause in a man who knows what silence costs. Scene 3. The lobby. When a body has to stand up anyway. By late afternoon, the rain outside has thinned into a fine mist, turning the city's glass buildings into mirrors. Jessica arrives at Sterling headquarters with hospital documents clutched against her chest like a shield. The edges of the papers are already bent from her grip. Her sleeve still bears a faint rust-colored stain she couldn't scrub out completely. The building looks like a modern temple. Tall glass doors, cold lighting, polished stone that reflects your feet back at you. The lobby air is too cool. It makes her skin prickle, as if the temperature itself is trying to push her out. 2 security guards in dark suits stand near the front desk. Their faces hold polite expressions that never reach their eyes. Jessica walks straight up to the counter. I need Matthew Ryan Sterling, she says. The receptionist's smile is perfect, professional, empty. Do you have an appointment? Jessica slides the documents across the counter just enough for the header to show. St. Anne Medical Center. Pediatric Oncology. It's urgent. The receptionist glances at the papers like they're a flyer someone left on a car windshield. I'm sorry, ma'am. Mr. Sterling is unavailable. Jessica's fingers tighten on the remaining papers. The edges crinkle. I have his son at St. Anne, she says, each word placed carefully, as if the wrong order might get it dismissed. He needs a transplant. We need Matthew, now. One of the security guards steps half a pace closer, not aggressive, just present. Ma'am, he says, you need to lower your voice. Jessica doesn't realize her voice rose until he says it. She draws a breath, and the breath catches halfway. The air doesn't fill all the way. She tries again, quicker, and it turns into a shallow pull that makes her shoulders lift. The lobby suddenly feels narrower. The bright marble floor seems to tilt slightly. The distant sound of elevators becomes louder, then muffled, then loud again. She presses her palm to the counter's edge, fingertips whitening. A small damp mark appears where her skin touches the stone. "I'm not leaving," she says, but her words come out with a faint crack at the end, like her throat is getting tight around them. The receptionist looks past her, not at her, as if looking directly would turn this into something human. "I can't help you," the receptionist replies, and reaches for a phone as if to call someone whose job is removal. Jessica tries to straighten. She makes her spine longer, lifts her chin. For a second, her knees soften and the world blurs at the edges. She catches herself with the counter, fingers digging into cold stone. The security guard steps closer. "Ma'am," he repeats, gentler but firmer. "I need you to step away from the desk." Jessica turns her head slightly. She sees her own reflection in the glass wall, fragmented by the seams between panels. A woman divided into pieces by architecture. She swallows again. Her mouth is dry. She takes another shallow breath. "I'm not asking for money," she says, voice lower now, as if she's speaking to the building itself. "I'm asking for time." The security guard doesn't respond. He simply gestures toward the doors with an open hand. Jessica's grip on the papers tightens until the paper nearly tears. She makes one last attempt, leaning forward, lowering her voice like that will make this acceptable. "Tell him Jessica Nicole Davis is here," she says. "Tell him it's Christopher. Kit." The receptionist's eyes flicker, just for a moment, toward the name. Then the smile resets. "I'm sorry," she says again. "He's unavailable." Jessica stands there another beat, pressed between her own body and the glass and marble refusal of this place, and the air in her lungs still won't settle. Something remains unfinished. Her words hanging in the lobby without reaching the person they were meant for. Scene 4. The Venom. The villain. Steps close. The elevator doors slide open without warning. Ashley Elizabeth Thorne steps out like she's arriving exactly on schedule. She moves through the lobby with a calm that doesn't hurry. She wears a coat that fits her perfectly, the fabric smooth and dry despite the wet air outside. She carries a slim folder as if this is just another part of her day. Her gaze lands on Jessica and doesn't waver. Ashley's face rearranges into concern, a softening around the eyes, a slight tilt of the head, the kind of expression that makes strangers think she's trying. "Oh," Ashley says, and lets the word fall like she's surprised to see a mess here. "You shouldn't be standing like that." Jessica shifts, instinctively pulling the papers closer to her chest. "I need to see him," Jessica says. Ashley comes nearer and lightly takes Jessica's elbow, as if to steady her. Her fingers press a little harder than necessary, not enough for anyone to notice, enough for Jessica to feel it. "Matthew can't be interrupted," Ashley says, voice soft, reasonable, almost kind. "He has obligations you don't understand." Jessica's breath shortens again. She tries to pull her arm back. Ashley keeps holding, still smiling. "I understand a child needs a father," Jessica says. "He needs to hear." Ashley leans in, just enough that her perfume, clean, expensive, sharp, fills Jessica's nose and replaces the hospital smell still clinging to her clothing. Her voice drops so low only Jessica can hear. "You really think he cares?" Ashley murmurs. Jessica doesn't answer. Her jaw tightens. Ashley continues, her tone unchanged as if she's discussing weather. "If you drop right here on this floor," a small pause, "it would simplify things." Jessica's hand goes to her chest again, reflexive, pressing under her shirt as if she can hold her heart in place. Ashley's mouth stays gentle. Her words don't. "And those kids," Ashley adds, eyes flicking toward the documents. "No one wants that kind of complication." Jessica's throat works. Her mouth opens, but the air doesn't come in right away. A security guard steps closer, reading the scene as Ashley intends it to be read. Ashley helping, Jessica unstable. Ashley straightens and lifts her voice just enough for the lobby to hear, her tone warm and public. "Can someone get her some water?" Ashley asks, like she's worried about a stranger in line at the pharmacy. "She doesn't look well." Jessica's cheeks pale. She tries to stand fully upright, but her knees soften again for a beat. The guard steps in closer to Jessica now, not to Ashley. "Ma'am," he says, "we're going to escort you outside." Jessica's eyes dart toward the elevator, toward the upper floors, toward the invisible space where Matthew is still talking about acquisitions. "She blocked him," Jessica tries to say, but the words come out uneven. "She..." Ashley's fingers slip from Jessica's elbow as if she never held her at all. Ashley takes one step back and folds her hands in front of her, a picture of composure. Jessica is guided toward the glass doors. Each step feels heavier than it should. The cool air in the lobby turns colder near the entrance. The doors open, and damp wind hits her face. Outside, the sidewalk is slick. The city moves around her like she's not there. She turns once, looking back through the glass. The lobby lights throw reflections across the doors, layering Jessica's image over the marble and steel like a ghost trapped between worlds. Inside, Ashley stands perfectly still, watching. Above her, somewhere unseen, Matthew remains on the other side of a barrier he doesn't even know exists. The glass doors close slowly with a soft seal. Jessica is left outside, one hand braced against the stone wall, the other holding papers that are beginning to wrinkle from rain. Inside, Ashley turns and walks away without looking back. And in Matthew's office, his phone sits face down on a polished table, quiet, obedient, and completely under someone else's thumb. At St. Anne, time has a sound. Not the obvious ones, the overhead pages, the wheels of a linen cart, the coughs behind curtains. It's the smaller, sharper noises that start to take over. The pump that clicks every few seconds, the soft hiss of oxygen, the monitor that refuses to stop counting. Jessica. Nicole Davis stands at the foot of Christopher's bed and watches the blanket rise. Not much, just enough to prove the body is still negotiating. Kit's face has taken on a shade that doesn't belong on a child. The skin near his mouth looks too thin. When Jessica pulls the blanket higher, the fabric crackles, dry and papery, like it's been washed one too many times. His nose starts again, slow at first, then steady. A line that refuses to be a line. Jessica presses a clean gauze pad under his nostrils, careful not to bump the tubing. Her hand moves with the practiced economy of someone who's done hard things in private for years. The gauze warms quickly, darkens. Michael stands on the other side of the bed, too still. His eyes go from the monitor to his mother's hands and back again, tracking every change like he's reading a storm. Joshua is behind him, up on tiptoe, trying to see over the railing. "Is he gonna wake up?" Joshua asks. Jessica shifts her body slightly, blocking Joshua's view of the blood without making a show of it. "Go get the book," she says softly. "The one with the dogs." Joshua hesitates, mouth open. Michael nudges him once with his elbow, and Joshua goes, half run, half walk, down the corridor toward the family room where the volunteers keep donated toys. A doctor comes in with a clipboard and a face that's been awake too long. He doesn't sit. "We're not seeing the response we wanted," he says, voice controlled. "The chemo isn't giving us enough room. We need to move faster on the transplant workup." Jessica's fingers tighten around the bed rail. Her knuckles blanch. "How fast?" she asks. The doctor glances at the monitor, then back at her. "Days," he says, "not weeks." Jessica nods once. The motion is small, like signing a document with her neck. She steps out into the corridor to breathe air that doesn't smell like antiseptic and plastic. It still smells like those things. It just doesn't smell as concentrated. Halfway down the hall, there's a small TV mounted high in a corner. Volume muted. A local station cycles through soft focus footage. Smiling people, raised glasses, a step-and-repeat backdrop with logos. A banner crawls across the bottom. Sterling Foundation, Annual Gala. Tonight. Then Matthew Ryan Sterling appears on screen, moving through a crowd with a camera-ready grin, a dark suit, a hand raised like he's blessing the room with his presence. He leans into a microphone, says something to someone off-screen. The captions scroll too quickly to read. Jessica stops walking. Her gaze locks onto the screen the way it locked onto Kit's monitor earlier, only this time there's no rhythm to trust. She reaches into her pocket for her phone and checks it again, like the device might have changed while she wasn't looking. No reply. She opens her wallet. The contents look like the inside of a life lived on the edge of enough. Expired cards, a gas receipt, a grocery coupon, cash folded thinly. And the rent envelope, half full, stares back at her like a promise she already broke by thinking about breaking it. Jessica closes her eyes for a beat. Her fingertips touch the center of her chest beneath her sweater, pressing lightly, as if she's settling something that wants to surge. She opens her eyes and looks back at the TV. Matthew on mute, smiling. Jessica makes a choice that doesn't look noble. It looks quick. She pulls the rent envelope out of her wallet and tucks it into her pocket. Then she turns and walks, not toward the ICU, toward the elevator. Scene 2, the gala, the world where no one bleeds. The hotel ballroom smells like fresh flowers and money that never had to be counted. There's warm light everywhere, golden, flattering, forgiving. Chandeliers scatter it across polished floors. The music is loud enough to drown out anything that doesn't belong. A hospital beep, a child's thin breath, a mother's hand shaking against a bed rail. Servers glide between clusters of people holding flutes of champagne. Laughter comes easy here, built into the walls. Men in tailored suits talk about impact and community the way they talk about stocks. Women in dresses that shimmer with each step tilt their heads and smile in a practiced rhythm. Jessica steps through the entrance and feels the air hit her skin. Too warm, too perfumed, too far from everything that matters. The dress she found is simple and cheap in the way only cheap fabric can be. It holds shape until you move, then it betrays itself with a slight pull at the seams. She had bought it on the way here with a fist of rent money in her pocket, not looking at price tags longer than a second. She had put it on in the hospital bathroom because she couldn't bear to go home and see the boys' backpacks on the floor and the old envelope above the fridge waiting like it had been waiting for years. In that bathroom mirror, she had pinned her hair up with a drugstore clip. Her hands had trembled when she tried to draw a clean line of lipstick, not for prettiness, for armor. Before leaving, she'd opened her purse and found something she didn't remember placing there. The sealed envelope addressed to Matthew, edges softened, paper worn from being moved and never used. She had stared at it for a second too long, then she slid it into an inner pocket and zipped it shut. as if burying it inside the only thing she could control tonight. Now, inside the ballroom, she keeps her chin level and her steps measured because her body is already sending quiet notes of protest. A faint buzzing in one ear. Breath that won't fully fill. A warmth creeping up the back of her neck under the hotel lights. She ignores every signal the way she's ignored them for years. She scans, and there he is. Matthew stands near the stage, half turned toward a group of donors. He holds a glass in one hand, like it was designed to make him look relaxed. He talks and smiles and nods, present in the way a man is present when he's trained to be seen. Beside him, Ashley Elizabeth Thorne is positioned like a shadow that knows exactly where the light falls. One hand rests lightly on Matthew's forearm. Her smile is calibrated. Her eyes move over the room, counting faces, tracking angles, watching for threats before they become headlines. Jessica's throat tightens. She grips the small clutch in her hand as if it contains something heavier than lipstick in a phone. Her other hand brushes the inside of her purse where the sealed envelope rests, still closed, still unsent, still waiting for a moment that keeps not arriving. Jessica starts walking. Scene 3. Interception. The silence before the storm. The first impact isn't words, it's the look. Matthew lifts his gaze mid-sentence and sees her. His smile freezes in place like a mask caught on a nail. His eyes narrow slightly, not in anger, more like his mind is trying to decide whether what he's seeing belongs in the room. The color drains just enough from his face that it shows under the warm ballroom lights. His jaw sets. He doesn't move forward. He doesn't step back. He simply stands there, held by a memory he thought distance could erase. Jessica comes close enough to smell him. Clean soap, a hint of cologne, the kind of scent that never had to fight hospital disinfectant. Matthew's mouth opens and closes once. Jessica, he says. The name lands low, like something he didn't plan to say out loud again. Ashley shifts immediately, half a step, smile intact, shoulder angled just right to become a wall without looking like one. "Oh," Ashley says warmly, as if she's greeting someone at a charity brunch. "You're here." Jessica looks past her. "Matthew, I need—" Her voice cuts out halfway. Not dramatic, just a stumble, like air that won't coordinate with her mouth. Matthew's gaze flickers to her lips, then to her face, then briefly, to the faint discoloration on her wrist where hospital tape had been not long ago. He looks away too quickly. Ashley's fingers tighten slightly on Matthew's forearm, a subtle pressure that reads as affection to anyone watching and control to anyone who's lived under it. "Matthew has a full schedule tonight," Ashley says, still smiling. "If you're looking for a donation—" "It's not a donation," Jessica says, forcing the words through a throat that feels too dry. "It's a child." Matthew's eyes sharpen. "What are you doing here?" he asks. Not loud, but the room around them seems to hush anyway, as if people can sense the shape of trouble even before they understand it. Jessica's gaze flicks toward the stage, the microphone, the crowd, toward the cameras pointed at Matthew, toward the people who came to clap for generosity without ever seeing what desperation looks like under fluorescent lights. If she waits, Ashley will guide Matthew away with a gentle hand and a smooth excuse. If she lowers her voice, this will become one more thing that disappears in his life, another problem filtered out by the woman beside him. Jessica's fingers find the edge of the sealed envelope inside her purse, pressing it without pulling it out. Her shoulders square. She chooses the only place where no one can pretend they didn't hear. Scene 4. The bomb, when the truth becomes a shout. The words come out like the last breath before a fall. He's dying. The ballroom doesn't go silent all at once. It happens in layers. A laugh stops mid-note. A glass pauses halfway to a mouth. A server freezes near a table, tray balanced, eyes widening. The music continues for a beat too long before someone signals the band. Matthew blinks once, slow, like his brain is trying to catch up to his body. Jessica takes one step closer. Her face is pale under the warm light, but her gaze doesn't drop. "Your son is dying," she says, voice louder now, forced steady by something that has nothing to do with courage and everything to do with having no other option. "And you're the only person who can save him." A murmur ripples through the crowd. People turn their heads. Phones tilt slightly upward like flowers reaching for sun. Matthew's glass lowers in his hand without him noticing. Ashley's smile holds, almost. For less than a second, the corners of her mouth flatten. Her eyes flicker sharp, calculating. Then the warmth returns, poured back into her face like syrup. "Jessica," Ashley says sweetly, "you're making a scene." Jessica doesn't look at her. "I called," Jessica says. Words clipped, each one a rung on a ladder she's climbing with bruised hands. "I went to your building. I stood in your lobby with paperwork from the hospital. Your people shut the doors, every one of them." Matthew's brows knit. "My people!" Jessica doesn't let him finish. "I don't have time for your confusion," she says, voice cracking at the edge but not breaking. "I have a 6-year-old with tubes in his arms and blood that won't stop doing what it's doing. I have 2 other boys asking questions I can't answer. And I have doctors saying days like it's a normal word." Matthew's face tightens. His throat works once. "Stop," he says, more to the room than to her, as if he can control the narrative by commanding it. Jessica lifts her chin. "Christopher," she says, and the name lands on the marble floor like a weight. "Kit, he's yours." Matthew's eyes widen a fraction. His gaze darts to Ashley, as if expecting her to correct the room, to fix it. Ashley's fingers slip from his arm, then return, a touch that tries to anchor him. "He doesn't have children," Ashley says lightly to the people nearby, her laugh small and controlled, like she's smoothing a wrinkle in expensive fabric. "This is old history, and it's clearly—" Jessica turns her head toward Ashley then, just enough. Her eyes meet Ashley's smile. The look holds for half a second. Jessica turns back to Matthew. "I'm not here for your money," she says. "I'm here because the hospital asked me, where is the father? And I didn't have an answer that kept my son alive." Matthew's mouth opens. No sound comes. The room waits. And then something small happens. Small and devastating. Jessica's hand lifts to the center of her chest. Not theatrical, not performed. Reflex. Her fingers press hard. Her breath catches midway in. Her shoulders rise, then stall. Matthew's eyes snap to her hand. "Jessica?" he says. The name different now. Lower, sharper. Jessica tries to draw air again. It doesn't go all the way in. The warm ballroom lights blur at the edges as if the room is slipping sideways. Sound dulls. The crowd becomes distant. She sways. Scene 5. The fall. When a body can't keep pretending. Jessica's knees soften. She tries to steady herself with the purse strap, but the strap slides on her shoulder. The world tilts just enough that the chandeliers above seem to drift. A server reaches out. Too far. Someone says, "Is she okay?" As if okay is an option you can pick. Jessica's lips part again. No words, just air struggling through a space that doesn't want to open. She starts to go down. Matthew moves before his brain finishes deciding. His arm catches her under the shoulders, strong and immediate, like his body remembers responsibility even if his mind has avoided it for years. He pulls her against him without thinking about cameras, donors, or what Ashley might say. Jessica's head tips back against his chest. Her hair smells faintly of hospital soap and cheap shampoo. Under it, a lingering trace of disinfectant clings to her skin. The contrast with the ballroom's perfume is brutal, like two worlds crashing into one body. Matthew looks down at her face, close enough to see the slight bluish tint near her lips, the strain at her throat, the way her lashes tremble against her cheek as her eyes flutter. He tightens his hold. "Call an ambulance," someone says loudly, and another voice replies, "We're in a hotel." Ashley steps forward, hands raised slightly, expression arranged into worry for the crowd. "Please," she says gently to everyone watching, "give her space." But her eyes are not on Jessica. They're on Matthew's arms around her. They're on the angle of his body, shielding her. They're on the way the room is reading this image, the billionaire holding the woman he was supposed to have erased. Ashley's jaw tenses for a fraction of a second. Then she kneels beside them, keeping her voice calm and low enough to sound caring. "Matthew," she says, "this is exactly what I warned you about." Matthew doesn't look at her. He stares at Jessica's purse, which has fallen open slightly in the struggle. Something inside has shifted. A sealed envelope, creased, worn, slides partway into view, addressed in careful handwriting. Matthew's gaze catches on the name written across the front. Matthew Ryan Sterling. His fingers twitch as if to reach for it. Before he can, a darker drop hits the ballroom floor near his polished shoes. Then another. Blood. Not Kit's, Jessica's. Matthew's eyes drop to the floor. He stares at the small dark spots on the marble as if the room finally showed him the kind of truth his glass walls have always kept out. The crowd is silent now. Phones are up, faces are turned, and Ashley, still kneeling, has gone very still. Her smile gone thin at the edges, as if the room has finally shifted somewhere she can't control. Matthew lifts his head, eyes scanning the room like he's looking for a door that leads to the only place that matters. He opens his mouth, and the sound that comes out is not a speech, not a command. It's a single, rough word. Hospital. He stands, holding Jessica, the sealed envelope still half visible in her purse like a confession waiting to be read. The room watches as the image burns into everyone's mind. Matthew Ryan Sterling carrying Jessica Nicole Davis out of a ballroom built for applause toward a night that won't let him hide. And behind them, Ashley remains on the marble floor for one beat too long, hands empty, eyes sharp, and a plan reforming in the silence. Now tell me, honestly, when Jessica said it out loud in that room, "Your son is dying," do you think she did the right thing? Would you have done the same in her place, or would you have tried to keep your pain quiet and carry it alone? Jessica wakes like someone surfacing from cold water. The first thing she registers isn't pain. It's the way her breath arrives in fragments, like it's been rationed. The oxygen mask presses against her face. Warm plastic smelling faintly of rubber and something sweet bitter from the tubing. The sheet beneath her is rough, hospital cotton that doesn't pretend to be soft. The overhead lights are too white, no shadows to hide that her body has been trying to warn her for a long time. She tries to shift, and everything feels heavier than it should. Not just limbs, time. The act of lifting her hand an inch, her eyes move to the right. Matthew Ryan Sterling is there, not the man from the stage with the microphone and the controlled smile. This version looks like he lost a fight with a knight he didn't expect. His shirt is wrinkled, collar slightly crooked. His hair refuses to sit the way it did under ballroom lighting. His eyes are red-rimmed in a way that doesn't read like tenderness. It reads like shock that never found a place to go. He's standing, but his hands can't decide what to do. His fists close, open, close again, as if he's trying to hold on to the only language he knows: control. Jessica's mouth opens. Her throat is dry, scraped raw by the mask. The attempt at a word turns into a shallow cough. The cough pulls at her chest, and her fingers drift there without thinking. Matthew watches her hand land over her sternum. His jaw tightens. "You stormed into my world," he says quietly, voice low enough that it doesn't sound like a performance. "You lit it on fire in front of donors and cameras, and you want me to just, what, accept it?" Jessica blinks slowly. Her eyelids feel too heavy. She turns her face slightly toward him, more effort than it should be. "I didn't come there to punish you," she tries to say. The sentence breaks in the middle. Air doesn't arrive when she expects it. She swallows, tasting the dry, metallic edge of fear in the back of her throat without naming it. Matthew interprets her pause as strategy. He's been trained to see silence as negotiation. "I want a DNA test," he says. "Today. Right now. I want it done through a lab I choose. I want to end this. Whatever this is. Whatever this is. Not children. Not blood. Not a boy with a line running into his arm in the other wing of the hospital. A problem. A threat. A headline." Jessica's gaze doesn't drop. She doesn't reach for his hand. She doesn't plead. She doesn't soften the corners to make him comfortable. "I didn't come for your money, Matthew," she says, voice thin, scraped, but steady. Matthew gives a short laugh without humor. "Everyone comes for my money." He says it like it's a law of nature, like gravity. Jessica's eyes close for a second, not in surrender, more like bracing. When she opens them again, her lashes stick slightly, the edges damp from the oxygen. "Then do the test," she says. "But after you get your numbers, you don't get to pretend you don't understand what they mean." Matthew's mouth twitches as if he wants to argue with the simplicity of that. His gaze flickers to her purse on the chair beside the bed, the strap twisted. The zipper is half open. Inside, the sealed envelope is still there, corners worn, paper slightly bowed from being carried too long. Matthew's eyes snag on it. He doesn't reach for it. He straightens like he's going back into armor. "Fine," he says, and turns toward the door. Jessica watches him leave without calling after him. In the hallway, the hospital smell hits him. Disinfectant, old coffee, the faint sting of latex. People move in scrubs with tired eyes and fast hands. A child laughs somewhere, and it sounds like it came from a different universe. Matthew's phone buzzes. Ashley. He doesn't answer at first. It buzzes again. He swipes, and her voice is instantly soft, composed, intimate enough to sound like she belongs in every corner of his life. "Are you okay?" she asks. "I've been trying to reach you. The way you left the ballroom, Matthew. It looked chaotic." He doesn't respond with reassurance. He doesn't have any to spare. "I'm at the hospital," he says. A beat. "Oh," Ashley replies, gentle. "I assumed she'd create some emergency to keep you close. That's what people like her do." People like her. Matthew closes his eyes briefly, as if his brain is trying to slot Ashley's tone into the day's facts and failing. "I'm getting a DNA test," he said. Ashley exhales like she's relieved. "Good," she says, the word warm and careful. "Good. That's smart. That's you. Facts, not theatrics." He doesn't like how relieved she sounds. He ends the call without saying goodbye. Scene 2. The failed sabotage. The villain plays clean only on the surface. Ashley arrives less than an hour later, not looking rushed, not looking like she was dragged into reality by a crisis. She walks into the hospital like it's another boardroom, heels steady, hair perfect, coat draped like a decision. She doesn't head to Jessica's room. She doesn't offer to check on the boys. She goes where systems can be bent. The nurse's station is a half circle of computers and clipboards, a place where names become charts, where a small mistake can become a door. Ashley approaches with that practiced expression, concern shaped into something palatable. "Hi," she says, sweet enough to be mistaken for kind. "I'm sorry to bother you. I'm with Matthew Ryan Sterling." The younger nurse looks up, eyes flicking briefly toward Ashley's coat, her watch, the kind of polish that usually signals donors and administrators. "We're doing a paternity test," Ashley continues. "I just want to make sure it's handled properly, reliably." Reliably is the word she uses like a needle. Ashley slides a thin envelope across the counter with 2 fingers as if it's just paperwork, not dramatic, not thick. Enough to feel significant without looking like bribery. The nurse's hand hovers, not reaching, not rejecting. A pause where a life can turn, a voice cuts through from behind. "Ma'am." Diane Parker steps into view. She's in scrubs, her hair pulled back tight, ID badge worn from years. She doesn't raise her voice. She doesn't need to. She's the type of person the hospital bends around because it has no choice. Diane's eyes go to the envelope, then to Ashley. "Step away from the counter," Diane says, calm and flat. Ashley's smile doesn't crack, not immediately. "Oh," Ashley replies lightly. "I was just trying to help. It's a delicate situation, and I've seen labs make mistakes. Surely you understand." Diane's gaze doesn't move. "I understand the difference between help and influence," Diane says. "And I understand when someone thinks a child's blood is a negotiation." Ashley's jaw tightens for a fraction of a second before she smooths it away. She pulls the envelope back with the same delicate fingers that slid it forward. "Of course," she says. "I wouldn't want anyone to misunderstand." Her eyes flick briefly over Diane's face, as if cataloging her as a future obstacle. Diane doesn't flinch. Ashley walks away, heels tapping, posture steady. But as she turns the corner, her hand tightens around her phone hard enough that her knuckles whiten. She texts one name: Rick Caldwell. Just 2 words: need leverage. Scene 3, the result. When a piece of paper collapses an empire. The DNA test doesn't arrive with drama, no music cue, no slow motion. It comes in an ordinary folder handed to Matthew by a lab tech who looks like she's handed out dozens of life-altering results before lunch. "Mr. Sterling," she says, "these are the results you requested." Matthew takes the folder like it might be heavier than paper. His fingers tremble barely. Not enough for anyone across the room to notice, enough for him. Ashley is beside him, close but not touching. Her perfume is clean and expensive. Her gaze stays on the folder like it's a contract. Jessica sits on the bed, propped up by pillows. Her oxygen tubing has been switched to a nasal cannula. Her breathing still catches in places, but her posture is upright, controlled. The hospital gown makes her look smaller, but it doesn't make her look less. Michael and Joshua are not in the room. Diane has them in the pediatric wing with snack packs and coloring books and a quiet kind of vigilance. Matthew opens the folder. The pages are clinical. Numbers, percentages, dense paragraphs of scientific language that doesn't care about timing or regret. He reads the line once, again, a third time, slower, like his eyes are refusing to accept what his brain already understands. Probability? of paternity? 99.9%. Not for one child, for 3. Matthew's hand goes still. The air in the room changes without anyone saying a word. Ashley leans in, her voice low and steady, offering a lifeline that looks like logic. "Matthew," she says, "these things can be manipulated. Labs. Mistakes happen. If she had access to—" Matthew lifts one hand, not at Ashley, at the air, a silent stop sign. He doesn't look at her when he does it. His gaze stays locked on the paper as if it's an obituary with his name on it. His mouth opens. No sound at first, then one word comes out, barely audible. 3. It's not joy. It's not awe. It's weight. Ashley's eyes sharpen. Her fingers curl around her own wrist like she's holding herself in place. Jessica doesn't smile. She doesn't smirk. She doesn't win. She just watches him, breathing shallowly, waiting to see what a man who has always bought his way out of consequences will do when the consequence has his eyes. Matthew lowers the paper. He looks at Jessica for the first time in the room like he's actually seeing her, not as a threat, not as a headline, as someone who carried something enormous while he built glass walls and called it safety. He wants to ask why. He wants to ask how. He wants to demand the missing years back with words. Instead, he stands. His knees look slightly unsteady as he moves toward the door. "Where are you going?" Ashley asks, tone still calm but with a sharp edge under it. Matthew doesn't answer her. He leaves. Scene 4, the first look, when he sees himself in a child. The pediatric wing has drawings taped to the walls, crayons, construction paper, a crooked sun with too many rays, a dog that looks like a potato. Someone has written in careful block letters, "Be brave." Matthew walks past all of it like he's walking through a hallway of accusations. The smell is different here, still antiseptic, but mixed with grape-flavored medicine and something sweet from a vending machine. It's a place trying hard to be gentle. He stops outside the glass doors of the pediatric ICU. A nurse checks his wristband. "Family?" she asks. Matthew's throat moves. "Yes," he says. The word feels new in his mouth. Inside, Christopher, Kit, lies in a bed that looks too big around him. His head is bare. His skin is pale under the fluorescent lights. An IV line snakes into his arm. A monitor keeps the count of his body's effort in bright green numbers. Kit's chest rises and falls in small movements, like even breathing has become careful. Matthew takes one step into the room, then another. He expects the floor to feel different, like the money in his account should shift gravity. It doesn't. It's just linoleum. He reaches the side of the bed and stops. Because then he sees it. Not a resemblance, not a maybe. The eyes. His eyes. The shape is the same. The slight downward tilt at the outer corners, the dark rim, the way the gaze looks like it's built to study before it trusts. Matthew's hand lifts, hovering near the bed rail without touching. His fingers look too large, too clumsy for this space. Kit's eyelids flutter, slow, heavy. He opens his eyes and stares at Matthew, not accusing, not demanding, just staring, the way children do when they sense something important and don't yet have language for it. Matthew swallows, his throat tightens. His breath comes out uneven. "Hey," he manages, voice rough around the edges. "Hey, buddy." Kit blinks once. His lips part, but no words come. His breath makes a small sound, irregular, the way a weak body tries to keep the rhythm. Matthew's palm presses to the cold metal rail instead of the boy's hand. He looks at Kit's wrist, wrapped with tape and a hospital tag. He looks at the monitor numbers. Then he looks at the child's face again. A nurse adjusts something quietly, not interfering, but watching. Matthew turns his head toward her. "What do I have to do?" he says, the words scraping out of him without polish. Not how much, not who do I call, not can we move him to a better hospital. What do I have to do? The nurse's expression stays professional. Her voice is calm. "The transplant team will go over your eligibility," she says. "You'll need to be evaluated. You'll likely be the haploidentical donor." Matthew nods once, a stiff motion that looks like agreement and surrender at the same time. He reaches toward Kit again, slower this time. His finger touches the boy's blanket near his hand, careful, as if the slightest pressure might break something. Kit's fingers shift under the fabric. They don't grab him yet, but they move. A tiny, unconscious reaction toward warmth. Matthew's shoulders drop just a fraction. He stands there, one hand on the rail, the other resting against the blanket, and he watches the rise and fall of Kit's chest like it's the only number that matters. Behind him, the door opens softly. Ashley steps in. She stays near the entrance, not approaching the bed. Her voice is quiet, meant to sound respectful. "Matthew," she says, "we need to talk about optics. The board is already asking questions. This situation..." Matthew doesn't turn. His eyes stay on Kit. Ashley waits, her patience tailored. When Matthew finally speaks, his voice is low and flat. "Not here," he says. Ashley's smile tries to return. "I'm only thinking about what's best for you," she whispers. Matthew's head tilts slightly, as if he heard something different in her sentence than he used to. He still doesn't look at her. "I'm thinking about what's best for him," he replies, and the word "him" lands like a claim. Ashley goes still. In the hallway outside, a shadow passes the glass. Rick Caldwell is there for a split second, watching, not entering, his phone in hand as if he's holding a message he hasn't decided to send. Michael appears behind Rick, just for a moment. He's holding a juice box, eyes fixed on Matthew inside the room. Michael doesn't come in. He simply watches. Then he turns and walks away, quietly, as if he's gathering data for a decision no child should have to make. Matthew doesn't see Michael. He sees Kit's eyes. And in the glass of the ICU window, he catches his own reflection lined up with Kit's face. Two sets of the same eyes. One older and full of mistakes. One small and fighting for time. He presses his palm harder against the rail, not a promise spoken, a decision made. And in the chair by the wall, Jessica's purse sits with the zipper slightly open. The sealed envelope inside it hasn't moved. But for the first time, it feels like it's no longer just waiting, it's watching. Now tell me, when that DNA result hit the page and Matthew saw those identical eyes in the ICU, did you feel more anger toward him? Or did something in your chest flip over right alongside his? For you, was that the moment he became a father? Or does that still not count yet? The hospital becomes a kind of temporary home, not the warm kind. The kind made of hard plastic chairs and endless corridors and coffee that always tastes like it was brewed hours ago and forgotten on a burner. The air is too clean. The lights are too bright. The time is measured in beeps, in footsteps, in the soft squeak of rubber soles passing by like tides. Matthew tries to live the way he always has, phone in hand, emails firing off, decisions made in clipped sentences. He tries to make the world obey him through sheer will and structure. But every time his thumb hovers over the screen, a monitor chirps somewhere down the hall, and the sound cuts through his focus like a warning. Here, nothing bends to you. Michael and Joshua sit in the pediatric waiting area, sharing a pack of crackers like it's an uneasy truce. Their legs don't reach the floor. Their shoes swing slightly, restless. Their eyes move to Matthew and away again, like they're trying to understand what kind of adult he is. Not the nurse kind, not the dad kind. Some third kind they don't have a name for yet. Joshua breaks the silence first, the way children do, straight to the bone, no padding. "So, are you really our dad?" he asks. "Or are you just, like, on paper?" Matthew's mouth opens, then closes. The question hits a place in him that isn't part of his vocabulary. He looks at Joshua, at the boy's face, at the way Joshua's brave is mostly loud. Matthew starts, and the word stalls. He tries again, quieter. "I'm trying to figure that out." It's too honest for him. It surprises him even as it leaves his mouth. Michael stays quieter, watching. Michael doesn't rush into emotional definitions. Michael measures. He reads. He listens for what adults don't say. Joshua points at Matthew's tie like it's an offense. "Why are you wearing that? Nobody wears a tie in a hospital." Matthew looks down at his tie as if seeing it for the first time. A strip of silk meant for boardrooms, for cameras, for rooms where nothing bleeds. He loosens it slowly. The knot slides down his collar like a surrender. He pulls it free, folds it awkwardly, like a man who's never folded anything that wasn't a contract, and stuffs it into his coat pocket. Joshua's mouth lifts in a small, satisfied smile, a tiny victory. A few minutes later, a nurse passes by and drops a child-sized blanket in Michael's lap without breaking stride. The blanket is thin, scratchy, a sad imitation of warmth. Michael tries to drape it over Joshua as Joshua starts to doze off, head leaning against the armrest. The blanket slips. It falls to the floor. Michael reaches, too late. Matthew reacts before he thinks. His hand moves quickly, catching the blanket mid-drop. The motion surprises Michael. It surprises Matthew, too. He crouches down. An unpracticed, awkward movement for a man who spent his life standing tall, above things, above people. The vinyl floor is cold through his slacks. His knee protests. He doesn't care. He folds the blanket with too much care, smoothing it like it matters. Then he drapes it over Joshua's shoulders gently. Joshua shifts in his sleep, seeking warmth without waking fully. And then, without meaning to, Joshua's small hands find Matthew's wrist and hold on, two tiny hands, light as air. And Matthew freezes, not for show, not because he knows someone is watching. Because the weight is nothing, and it anchors him harder than any signature ever has. His throat tightens. He looks down at those hands wrapped around him. And for a moment, the world of glass and steel and clean decisions feels like a place he dreamed up to avoid this exact feeling. Michael watches closely, eyes narrowed slightly, like he's filing away evidence. Matthew doesn't pull away. He simply stays there, crouched beside the chair, letting a sleeping child hold him like a question. And he realizes, with a quiet kind of terror, that he might not survive this closeness if he tries to keep being who he used to be. Scene 2. Medical gaslighting. When poison comes in the voice of concern, Ashley appears at the end of the corridor like she stepped out of another world. Her hair is perfect. Her blazer is crisp, in a building that wrinkled Matthew in one night. Her perfume is expensive and inappropriate in a place where parents hold paper cups and pray into their hands. She's carrying a coffee in one hand, a paper sleeve around it, like she's still the curator of his routines. "I brought your latte," she says, loud enough to be noticed, quiet enough to sound intimate. "The way you like it." Matthew doesn't take it. His eyes are fixed down the hall toward the pediatric ICU doors. Ashley's expression barely shifts, but her strategy does. She turns her voice into softness, into protection. "I'm trying to keep you safe," she says. You're emotional right now, vulnerable, and that's exactly when manipulative people strike. Matthew's gaze flicks to her, the smallest movement. Jessica? He asks, not because he's certain, but because he recognizes the direction Ashley always points. Ashley sighs like she's burdened by caring too much. You saw what happened at the gala, she says carefully. She collapsed in public, at the perfect moment, right when everyone was watching. Doesn't that feel convenient? Convenient. The word hangs in the air like a spider thread, thin and sticky. Ashley steps closer, lowering her voice as if she's sharing confidential medical truth. There are disorders, she says, syndromes. Mothers who exaggerate a child's illness to control someone, Munchausen by proxy. I've read about it, and with her history, showing up out of nowhere, making a scene, fainting. Matthew, this could be theater. She says it like she's offering him a raincoat, but it's a knife. And the worst part is Matthew listens, because he was trained to trust data, patterns, probability, the idea that if you can name something, you can manage it. Ashley knows his mind. She knows where his fear lives. She knows what it costs him to accept a reality he can't control. So, you're saying, Matthew begins, voice rough, you're saying she could be lying. Ashley's face softens in a way that would look compassionate to anyone who didn't know her. I'm saying we need to be careful, she replies. We need clarity, facts, proof. I don't want you to be exploited. Exploited. Matthew's jaw tightens. His eyes drift back down the corridor. He doesn't see what Ashley's watching for, the smallest shift in his posture, the crack in his new tenderness that she can pry open. She touches his arm lightly, possessive but disguised as support. If you let them in emotionally, she whispers, you'll lose everything you've built. Matthew swallows hard. His gaze flickers toward the waiting room, where Joshua sleeps with the blanket on his shoulders. Matthew remembers those small hands holding his wrist. A strange warmth moves through him, and with it, a flare of panic. Ashley watches his face like a scientist watching a reaction, and she smiles, almost imperceptibly, because she knows she's planted the seed. Scene 3. Doubt. The blow. Jessica didn't deserve. Jessica sits up in her hospital bed with pillows propped behind her back, trying to breathe without showing the struggle. The air comes in pieces. Each inhale feels like her chest has to negotiate for space. Her hands are busy, because busy hands help keep a person from falling apart. She's folding one of Christopher's small t-shirts slowly, smoothing out the wrinkles as if order on cotton can keep the universe from collapsing. The shirt is soft from too many washes. The collar is slightly stretched. It smells faintly like laundry soap and something sweet. His shampoo. Maybe. Something ordinary. Something she misses. She hears the door open. Matthew walks in without knocking, not raging, not loud. He doesn't need volume to bring pressure into a room. He carries it in his bones. Tell me exactly what the doctor said, he says. Jessica looks up, confused. What? The diagnosis, the treatment plan, everything. He steps forward. And why you waited so long? Jessica blinks, slow, like the words don't fit the reality. I didn't wait, she says quietly. I ran. I did everything. Alone. Matthew's gaze sweeps the room like he's looking for inconsistencies, like he's trying to make sense of his life through interrogation. And those collapses, he says, voice tightening. You've been fainting. Are you sure this is real? The room shrinks. Jessica doesn't understand at first, not because she's slow, but because the accusation is so absurd it takes a second to even locate it. She stares at him. Her throat tightens. You're calling me a liar. Matthew hesitates. Just a fraction. But in that fraction, she sees it. He's entertaining it. Something in Jessica's face changes. Not dramatic, not loud. Something settles, something hardens. She inhales, and it triggers a cough, dry and stubborn. She presses her palm to her chest, trying to steady herself. "Matthew," she says between breaths, "I'm trying to save our son. I'm trying to—" She coughs again, eyes watering. "Breathe." Matthew's expression flickers, conflicted. Like part of him recognizes the cruelty, and the other part is trapped in Ashley's framing. Proof, clarity, exploitation. "I just want the truth," he says, and he thinks he sounds reasonable. Jessica lets out a short laugh that has no humor in it. It breaks into something close to a sob, not because she's performing, but because exhaustion finally has claws. "The truth?" she whispers. "You want clarity?" She sets the little t-shirt down with shaking hands and looks at him with a steady, devastated gaze. "Look at me," she says. "Look at me, Matthew. Do you really think I would choose this? Do you think I want my baby hooked to machines? Do you think I wanted to spend my nights listening to monitors instead of bedtime stories?" Her voice cracks, but her spine doesn't. "I didn't come to you because I wanted you," she says, and that sentence cost her. "I came because my son is dying, because I had nowhere else to go, because I was out of time." Matthew stands there, caught between his old instincts and the reality in front of him. He doesn't know what to do with a truth that doesn't fit into strategy, so he does what men like him do when they feel powerless. He retreats. He turns and leaves, stiff and lost, like a man walking away from a fire he started. In the corridor, Ashley is already waiting, as if she planned the timing down to the second. She steps into his path, her face arranged into concern, eyes shining with false empathy. "Matthew," she murmurs, touching his arm with delicate ownership. "I'm so sorry you had to deal with that." He doesn't answer right away. Ashley tilts her head, lowering her voice as if she's sharing a diagnosis. "You see," she says gently, "unstable, defensive, emotional swings. That's exactly what I meant." Matthew's shoulders rise and fall once, a heavy breath. He stares down at the floor, jaw tight, and for a second, he looks like a man trying to rebuild his world with cracked tools. Ashley watches him, satisfied, because the storm she wanted is starting. And then, down the hall, behind the glass of the pediatric ICU, Christopher is awake. He's propped up just enough to hold a tablet, his hands thin but steady. The screen glows against the dim of the room. His eyes are tired, too old for his age. The front camera is on, recording. Not out of revenge, out of instinct. Because even a sick child can feel when the truth is being crushed. He watches the hallway through the screen. Watches Ashley lean in, watches Matthew's face twist, watches the grown-up world do what it always does, hurt the person who stayed. And the reflection of that screen glows in Christopher's eyes like a quiet warning. The kind of warning nobody hears until it's too late. Final image of Act 5. The tablet's glow reflected in Christopher's exhausted eyes as he records what no one wants to admit. Now tell me this, heart to heart. When Ashley planted doubt in Matthew's mind and he walked into Jessica's room questioning her, could you forgive that? Or are there things a man says once that you can never unhear? And if you want to see the moment Christopher's recording changes everything, don't look away. The night before the transplant carries a kind of quiet that isn't peace. It's pressure. It's the hush before something breaks. In the pediatric oncology corridor, everything moves like it's been calibrated. Nurses walking fast with eyes trained forward, metal carts squeaking, doors opening and closing with that soft hospital thud that swallows sound. The air smells like disinfectant, warm plastic, and coffee nobody finishes. Even the fluorescent lights feel tired. Matthew stands with a visitor's wristband pinching his skin. The paper edges slightly frayed from the way he keeps rubbing it with his thumb. His phone is open to an email, some subject line about quarterly projections, but his eyes keep pulling away again and again to the glass of the pediatric ICU. Behind it, Christopher sleeps. He looks too small for the bed. His skin is too thin under the cold light, like it's almost translucent. His chest rises and falls in small, careful movements that make the room feel like it's holding its breath with him. Matthew tells himself he's staying. He tells himself he has learned something. But learning is slow. Habits are fast. Ashley appears the way she always does. Immaculate, calm, composed. Like the world is only functional when she's directing it. Her heels don't even seem to make sound on the linoleum. "I need you to come with me. Now," she says. Matthew doesn't even turn his head. No. Ashley doesn't push with force. She doesn't need to. She shifts her tone, soft, low, the kind that slides into a man's ear without raising alarms. "It's the company," she says, as if she's trying to protect him from inconvenience. "There's a problem with the board. They want your signature in person, tonight, live." Matthew's gaze stays on the ICU door. Ashley steps closer, careful not to appear desperate. She knows desperation is ugly. She knows beauty wins. "If this blows up," she continues, "tomorrow you won't have authorization for anything. Not the hospital fund, not the additional transplant team, not the approvals. They can freeze accounts. Matthew, they can freeze everything." She places fear inside an argument, the way she always does, and Matthew swallows. Because his entire life has been built around believing that holding things together is the same as loving people. That if you keep control, you keep everyone safe. That if you manage the world, nothing can fall apart. Ashley watches his jaw tighten. "It's only a few hours," she says, like she's offering him a glass of water. "You'll be back before dawn. Christopher won't even notice." That last sentence is a blade. Won't even notice. Matthew's eyes flick to the glass again. Christopher's chest rises, falls, small, fragile. The kind of fragile that feels like a moral test. He thinks of Jessica, her voice in that hospital room, the way she coughed and pressed her hand to her chest like she was trying to hold herself together from the inside. He thinks of Joshua's hands holding his wrist in sleep. And still, the old wiring in him sparks. Still, the logic Ashley has always used on him finds its way in. Because the worst traps don't shove you, they convince you. Matthew exhales slowly. He rubs his face with one hand, like he's trying to wipe away the decision. Ashley waits. She doesn't hurry him. She knows he'll do it. She knows exactly how to make a man betray himself while believing he's being responsible. Finally, Matthew reaches for his coat. The fabric is heavy, expensive. It hangs off him like a uniform he doesn't deserve right now. He walks down the corridor like someone moving through water. Every step, a quiet act of self-betrayal. At the ICU window, he stops. He presses his palm against the glass. Cold bites through his skin. The glass doesn't give. It never does. "I'll be back," he whispers. It's meant for Christopher, but it sounds like it's meant for Matthew. A promise to the part of him that's trying to become someone better. Ashley is already turning away because she knows promises are easy. Timing is what kills you. Scene 2. The disaster, when the world stops on the one night it can't. Outside, the sky falls apart. Rain comes down thick and violent, hammering the car roof so loudly it drowns out thought. The windshield wipers scrape back and forth in a frantic rhythm that never feels fast enough. Streetlights blur into smeared gold. Headlights smear into long red ribbons. The radio repeats storm alerts like a prayer that doesn't help. Traffic becomes a clogged artery, a line of brake lights stretching into the distance, unmoving. Matthew checks the time, then checks again, as if staring at numbers can force the world to cooperate. The car inches forward a foot, stops, inches forward again, stops. Somewhere ahead, sirens wail, an accident, a lane closure, a bridge partially blocked. The city has decided tonight is the night it will punish anyone who needs it not to. Matthew's phone buzzes. No signal. Buzzes again. A notification loads in fragments. Like even the internet is breaking under the storm. Christopher, fever, needs, now. Matthew's blood goes cold. He stabs at the screen, calling back. Nothing. Again. Nothing. He turns to the driver. Get around it. The driver shakes his head, tense. We can't, sir. Matthew's chest tightens. He can feel his heartbeat in his throat. It's a sensation he doesn't know what to do with because he's used to feeling powerful when things go wrong. But this isn't a meeting. This isn't a negotiation. This is a child's body turning on him. The car inches forward a few inches, stops. Matthew's hand goes to the door handle. He opens it. Rain slams into him instantly, cold and heavy, soaking his collar, his sleeves, his hair. The air smells like wet asphalt and hot metal and helplessness. He steps halfway out, looking at the locked line of cars like sheer anger might part them. Then he gets back in, slamming the door, water dripping from his coat. Ashley sits beside him, posture still too perfect, eyes on the chaos outside like she's watching a movie. She doesn't look scared. She looks entertained. I told you this would be complicated, she murmurs, almost gently. Matthew doesn't answer, because something is forming in him, something sharp and awful, a truth he's been avoiding. Some choices don't forgive you. Some choices don't offer a second chance. And suddenly, he understands that the road isn't punishing him. He's punishing himself. Scene 3. The heart breaks. 2 corridors, 2 ICUs, 1 world collapsing. Back at the hospital, the night changes temperature. In the pediatric ICU, the staff moves faster. Voices shorten. Hands become urgent. A doctor adjusts medication. A nurse checks Christopher's line, then checks again. The fever has climbed, and the room feels tighter because of it, like the air itself is worried. Christopher's eyelids flutter open for a moment. He looks past the nurse, past the room, as if he's searching for someone through the fog. Then his eyes close again, like staying awake costs him too much. In the pediatric waiting area, Michael and Joshua sit with Diane. Joshua tries to be brave, but his leg bounces uncontrollably, betraying him. His fingers twist the edge of his hoodie until the fabric wrinkles. His eyes keep darting to the door like he expects the right adult to walk through it and fix everything. Michael doesn't cry. Michael goes still. He turns into stone the way some children do, as if hardness will hold the world in place. His jaw is clenched. His eyes are wide, unblinking, watching every nurse who passes like he's trying to decode their faces. Diane's phone rings. She answers, and her face changes so fast it feels like watching a curtain drop. "Where is their father?" she asks, and the words come out dry, sharp. Desperate. She listens, her mouth tightening. Then she turns, scanning the corridor, scanning for Matthew like her will can summon him. Down another corridor, Jessica sits on a gurney, trying not to show that breathing is becoming a fight. Her skin is pale. Her lips look faintly bluish. She keeps inhaling like she's reaching for something just out of grasp. The effort is visible now, no matter how hard she tries to hide it. Someone says it, loud enough for the wrong person to hear. Matthew left. And like a shadow drawn to weak light, Ashley appears. She stands at the edge of the scene, perfectly placed. She doesn't rush. She doesn't push. She offers the statement like it's casual. "He had to handle an emergency," Ashley says, as if she's commenting on the weather. "He said he'd be back, but you know how his work is." Jessica doesn't understand at first. Her brain rejects it. She stares at Ashley, blinking, like the words are in a foreign language. "He left?" Jessica whispers. "Left!" The word lands in her body like a blow. She tries to sit up straighter. Her legs don't cooperate. Her vision darkens at the edges, the fluorescent lights turning into halos. Her hand goes to her chest, not in a dramatic, cinematic way, in a terrifying, human way. Her heart squeezes hard, ugly, brutal, like it's trying to beat, and her body is saying, "Not enough, not enough, not enough." Jessica opens her mouth. Air doesn't come. A choking sound escapes instead, small and frightened. Then she coughs, once, twice. And this time, it isn't just dry, it's wet, foamy, pink. Diane is suddenly moving. All composure gone. "Get help, now!" she shouts, her voice cracking the hallway open. A nurse spins around. Another runs. Someone calls out, "Code Blue!" The hospital becomes motion, footsteps pounding, wheels squealing, gloves snapping on, a crash cart appearing like it rises out of the floor. Jessica is rushed toward the adult ICU. The gurney moves fast, and Jessica's head lolls slightly to the side as her eyes flutter, fighting to stay open. Doors swing open, then close. A heavy, final sound, and in the pediatric ICU at the exact same time, the monitor beside Christopher changes its rhythm. A beep faster, then slower, then uneven, then wrong. Bradycardia. It isn't loud, but it slices through everything. Diane stands in the middle of two corridors, like her body is the line between two tragedies, like she's a bridge that can't hold the weight. "No," she whispers, staring at one set of doors, then the other. "Not now, not now." And the story does the one thing the audience can't stop imagining. It shows both doors at once. Adult ICU. Doctors surrounding Jessica, hands on her chest, commands shouted, sweat under cold light. Pediatric ICU. Christopher pale, nurses moving, the monitor insisting on danger with every erratic beep. And Matthew. Matthew is in neither place. Final image of Act 6, two corridors, two sets of doors, closing at the same time, two monitors fighting against silence. Now tell me, honestly, when Ashley said he had to handle an emergency and Jessica realized he wasn't there, did you feel rage at Ashley? Or did you feel rage at him too? I want to know where your limit was in that moment. The rain is still pounding the roof of the car, hard enough to make the metal sound like it's being tested, when Matthew's phone finally catches a thread of signal, just a thread. Just long enough for the past to crawl back onto the screen. A notification flashes like a ghost that refuses to stay buried. Jessica's attempts, missed calls, emails, messages, and one entry tagged as deleted. Matthew's stomach drops so fast it feels physical. He grips the phone with both hands like it might bite him, like it might reveal something he can't survive knowing. Water smears across the glass from his fingers, the screen slick with rain and panic. He goes into the call history, then the blocked list. And there it is, Jessica's name. Blocked, not by him, Something in Matthew's chest goes out of rhythm, like his heart is trying to argue with what his eyes are seeing. Slowly, he turns his head. Ashley sits beside him, perfectly dry on the inside, hair immaculate, makeup untouched. Her posture still composed, like she's in a conference room and not trapped in a storm with a boy dying on a monitor across town. Matthew holds the screen toward her. His voice comes out low, dangerous in its calm. "You blocked her." Ashley doesn't answer right away. She tries the oldest trick in her book first: innocent confusion, wide eyes, soft breath, a face that says, "I don't know what you mean," as if reality can be rewritten by tone. "Matthew, what are you talking about?" He starts scrolling, one screen after another, pulling the thread like a man who doesn't understand that the whole fabric is about to unravel. "You deleted messages," he says. "You filtered my calls. You pulled me out of the hospital. You brought me here while my—" He chokes on the word he has avoided for 6 years because it rearranges everything. "My son." It comes out rough, like it's been trapped in his throat all that time, gathering rust. Ashley tilts her head, and the half-smile appears, the one she uses when she believes she can still steer him back into the role he's always played for her. "I protected you," she says softly, as if she's speaking to a child. "If you can't understand that, it's because you're too emotional right now." Too emotional. That phrase hits a place in Matthew that has never lit up before. Not rage like a tantrum, a colder kind, a clarity that doesn't ask permission. Matthew's hand goes to the door handle. He opens the car door in the middle of the storm. Rain whips inside, immediately soaking his sleeve, his collar, the expensive fabric clinging to his skin like punishment. The driver starts to protest. "Sir, you can't—" But Matthew is already outside, stepping into the rain like he's stepping into a different life. He leans back in once, just long enough to look Ashley directly in the eyes. Not with fear, not with negotiation, with finality. "It's over, Ashley." And for the first time, he doesn't wait to see if she'll allow him to mean it. He slams the door. The sound is swallowed by thunder. Scene 2. The Odyssey. Running without air, running anyway. The city becomes a wet maze. Traffic is locked. Brake lights glow red in the rain like warning signs. Sirens wail somewhere distant but constant. Horns bark, angry and useless. Puddles shimmer under streetlights, reflecting a world that looks beautiful only from far away. Matthew runs. Not with grace. Not like a man who belongs on magazine covers. He runs like a man late to the only thing that's ever mattered. His expensive shoes slip on the slick pavement. His coat grows heavy with water. His breath saws in and out of him, sharp and ragged. His lungs burning like they've been asleep his whole life and only now woke up. He tries to call a car. No signal. Tries again. Nothing. He lifts his phone toward the sky like a ridiculous prayer. Nothing. The rain blinds him, cold needles against his face. Cars sit motionless, drivers trapped behind glass and resignation. And Matthew realizes something that feels humiliating in a new way. He built an empire, but he can't buy time. He can't buy a clear road. He can't buy the seconds he wasted. His eyes catch a building ahead, an emergency helipad on its roof. A small one, the kind meant for life or death days. A light blinks faintly in the rain. Matthew bolts toward it as if the helipad is the only solid ground left in the world. At the entrance, a man in a waterproof jacket steps in front of him, palms out. "You can't go up there." Matthew doesn't reach for money. He doesn't reach for status. He lifts his wrist. The crumpled hospital visitor band is still there, pinching, damp. pathetic, and suddenly it looks like the truest credential he's ever worn. "My son is dying," Matthew says, voice tearing on the words, "and his mother is too." The man hesitates, not because he recognizes Matthew Sterling, because he recognizes that word, dying. It changes people. It makes them human. Minutes later, the helicopter blades start to spin, chopping the air into violent wind. Rain lashes Matthew's face. His soaked hair whips back. The roar is so loud it empties his head of everything except one thing: get there. From above, the city looks distant, indifferent, like it doesn't care who lives or who doesn't. Matthew stares down at it and feels something he's never had to feel: powerlessness, and the bitter realization that he spent years learning how to dominate rooms and not 1 second learning how to show up where it matters. Scene 3. The arrival, the door. She tries to close. When Matthew bursts into the hospital, the smell of disinfectant hits him like a slap. Cold air, polished floors, fluorescent lighting that makes everything look too bright, too clean, like the building is pretending death doesn't happen here. He runs down the corridor, leaving wet footprints, his coat dripping water onto the shiny floor. Heads turn. A nurse steps forward, alarmed. "Sir, you can't—" "I can," Matthew says. And his voice doesn't beg, it doesn't bargain, it declares. He rounds the corner, and there she is, Ashley, dry, composed, perfectly styled, like she stepped out of a glossy advertisement and wandered into tragedy by mistake. She's standing in front of a door, arms open slightly, not in welcome, in blockade. "If you go through that door," she says, calm as a knife, "you destroy your life." Matthew stops. His chest rises and falls hard, as if every breath has to be earned. Water drips from his hair onto his eyelashes. His hands tremble, not with fear of her, with urgency, with rage at himself. "My life?" he repeats, almost disbelieving. "You're talking about my life while Jessica's heart is failing and my son's blood is—" He can't finish the sentence. It feels too brutal to say out loud. Failing. Ashley steps closer, lowering her voice so it sounds intimate, concerned, reasonable. The tone she uses when she wants to poison someone without being seen. "They're not your future," she murmurs. "I am." Matthew looks at her for one full second. A second long enough for him to see what he never wanted to name. The emptiness behind her tenderness. The hunger behind her loyalty. The way her love has always been possession, not care. And then Matthew moves her aside. Not with theatrical violence, with decision. With a simple, unmistakable act of removing an obstacle between himself and a child falling off a cliff. Ashley stumbles half a step, shocked, not by pain, but by the unfamiliar sensation of losing control. For the first time, her mask cracks. The sweetness drains away. What's left is something cold and unpretty. Matthew doesn't look back. He pushes through the door like he's walking through the wall of his old life. Scene 4. The sacrifice. A body as a promise. The surgical wing has its own kind of silence, not the quiet of peace, the quiet of sharp metal and controlled fear. Everything smells like sterile cloth and antiseptic and something faintly metallic, like the building itself remembers blood. Matthew is guided onto a gurney. A nurse secures an IV in his arm. The tape tugs at his skin, pulling hair, small discomforts that would have annoyed him once. Now he doesn't even blink. The doctor explains anesthesia, procedure, collection from the iliac crest, timing windows, critical minutes, words that sound clinical, clean, safer than the truth underneath them. Matthew hears none of it fully. He can only ask one thing. Is Jessica alive? The doctor hesitates, just a fraction of a second. We're trying to stabilize her. That sentence lands in Matthew like a brick, trying, not succeeding, trying. The story splits, the way a mind splits when it can't handle pain in one place. Down the hall, Jessica is surrounded by people in gowns and masks. Machines breathe for her in thin mechanical rhythms. A doctor wipes pink foam from the corner of her mouth with quick, practiced movements. Her skin is waxy pale. Her eyes are closed, lashes resting too still. Diane stands outside the adult ICU doors, hands clasped so tight her knuckles look almost white. She's not praying with pretty words. She's praying with her body. Back to Christopher. In the pediatric ICU, he is small and pale, the monitor beeping with tired insistence. A nurse adjusts something at his bedside. Another checks his temperature again, jaw tight. The air feels heavier in that room, as if oxygen itself is rationed. Back to Matthew. A mask comes down over his face. The plastic smells chemical and dry. He inhales, and the smell fills him like a warning. The edges of the room soften. Sound becomes distant. The ceiling lights blur into white halos. His eyelids grow heavy. The last thing he sees, before consciousness slips away, is the visitor band still on his wrist. Small, crumpled, embarrassing, and somehow the most real thing he has ever worn. The cut interlaces, a needle entering the bone at Matthew's hip, firm and precise. The muffled sounds of the procedure, the collection, blood, marrow, raw life in a color that isn't pretty. It's not cinematic, it's honest. And in another corridor, Jessica's heart is being fought for, hands compressing, voices calling numbers, commands clipped, urgent, the monitor refusing to become a straight line. Then, the moment the precious fluid is carried toward Christopher, a tube, a bag, a quiet transfer that doesn't look like money. It looks like a second chance. And in that silent movement, Matthew's body finally says what his mouth never learned to say: I'm staying. I'm paying with what I am. Final image of ACT7, a transparent tube, and inside it, the slow movement of something that looks like hope made visible. I need to ask you, heart to heart, when Ashley stood in that doorway and said, "They're not your future, I am," what would you have done in Matthew's place? Would you shove past her immediately? Or would you still be afraid of the scandal? If this part hit you, leave a like, because it helps this story find the people who need to feel this kind of justice. And if you want to see what happens when Jessica opens her eyes and when Christopher finally breathes without fighting, subscribe. A hospital never truly sleeps, but there's a difference when the worst has passed. The sound changes first. The alarms don't vanish. Nothing ever vanishes in a place like this, but they stop screaming. The footsteps in the hallway become less frantic. The air still smells like disinfectant and warmed plastic and tired coffee, but it stops feeling like a battlefield for a moment. The tension doesn't leave. It just learns how to breathe. Days turn into weeks in quiet, tender flashes. Stacks of paper cups by the vending machine. Morning light, slipping through bent blinds, turning everything pale gold. A child-sized blanket folded, unfolded, refolded. Like someone is trying to keep their hands busy so their heart doesn't break again. A wall clock marching forward with no respect for what this family had to survive just to see another sunrise. Christopher's color starts to come back. At first, it's almost impossible to trust your eyes. A warmer tone in his cheeks, less gray under his eyes. His lips not quite as dry. He still looks fragile, still too small under the sheets, still swallowed by tubes and careful routines. But there's something new, a return. Diane studies the lab reports with the kind of calm that comes from knowing hope can be startled. She doesn't celebrate too fast. She doesn't let herself breathe too loudly. Then she looks up and gives the smallest smile. It took 2 words, that's all. But for Jessica, it lands like a miracle spoken in a whisper. Not fireworks, not Hollywood, just life choosing to stay. Christopher remains under strict precautions, hand sanitizer at every turn, masks, no careless visitors, food introduced slowly, carefully, as if his body has to be reminded it's allowed to receive again. But he opens his eyes and holds focus longer now. And when he looks at Matthew, it's not the confused stare of a child facing a stranger. It's different. It's the look of a little boy trying to recognize a man who should have been there all along, like he's searching Matthew's face for a truth he can finally trust. Jessica, meanwhile, is not fine. She's alive. And sometimes that's the bravest thing a person can be after what she's been through. She wakes with tubes and bruises and a throat that burns when she tries to swallow. She learns slowly how to sit up without the room tilting, how to stand without the darkness creeping in at the edges. For a while, she needs a wheelchair, blanket over her knees, hair pulled back without ceremony, her body tired in places no one can see. But there's dignity in her, a quiet, unbreakable kind, as if her weakness has no permission to touch her character. And Matthew is there. Not for a photo op, not for a visit he can brag about. There. He learns the medication schedule like it's sacred, learns what each beat means, which nurse speaks fast, which one speaks softly, which doctor doesn't sugarcoat anything. He learns what foods Christopher can tolerate without nausea. He learns that Michael pretends he isn't afraid, but his hand grips his little brother's a little too hard when the hallway gets loud. He learns that Joshua makes jokes at the exact moment tears threaten, because laughter is the only shield he knows how to hold. One night, Jessica wakes to a shape in the dim light. Matthew asleep in a hard chair, neck bent at an awkward angle, his tie loosened and half tucked into his pocket like he forgot it existed. His hand is holding Christopher's, gently but firmly, as if he's terrified that if he lets go, everything will disappear. Jessica doesn't smile big. She doesn't forgive him in her eyes. She doesn't romanticize it. She just closes her eyes for a second, like someone offering a silent thank you to God for one thing. One small thing. Not being taken away. Scene 2. Ashley's fall. No scandal, just consequences. Ashley doesn't explode out of the story in some glamorous scene. She tries to leave the way she always leaves a room, polished, intact, untouchable. But hospitals have a strange honesty to them. Masks slip in the fluorescent lighting. Control doesn't stick as well. And lies don't carry the same weight when you're standing near a children's ICU. Rick shows up with a face that's tight and drawn, holding a thick folder of documents. It's not just emails. It's not just rumors. It's numbers, transfers, digital signatures, timestamps, patterns, an internal audit, a hole that can't be explained away with mistakes. Ashley starts speaking before anyone even finishes laying out the facts. "This is ridiculous," she says, voice sharp but dressed in elegance. "They're trying to blame me because—" Matthew cuts her off without raising his voice. "Stop." One word, and it hits the air like a door slamming. Ashley's eyes flick around the hallway, searching for a rope to grab, an ally, a sympathetic face, someone who still believes the story she's selling. She finds none. Not Rick, not the security staff, not the nurses who have watched families fall apart and know the scent of manipulation. And then Diane walks past her in the corridor without saying a word. No scolding, no lecture, just silence. And somehow that silence is worse than being shouted at. Ashley is escorted out, not in handcuffs, not dragged for a public spectacle, no cameras, no dramatic humiliation, just removed, like someone whose access has finally been revoked. As the elevator doors start to close, she tries one last strike, aimed straight at Matthew's weakness. "You're going to regret this," she says, lips curling. "She'll ruin you." Matthew doesn't flinch. He doesn't posture. He just says quietly, like a man admitting the truth to himself for the first time, "I was already ruined, I just didn't know it." The elevator doors slide shut, and for the first time in a long time, the air feels calmer. Not because everything is solved, but because the poison is gone. Scene 3, The Ask, when pride finally breaks. Later in Jessica's room, the light is low. The evening hush feels fragile, like the world has decided to speak softly out of respect. There's a faint smell of hospital soap and a small bouquet of cheap flowers someone left at reception, flowers that look like they've fought hard just to keep standing in a plastic cup. Jessica is awake, exhausted, eyes sharp but too tired to pretend she isn't. Matthew enters slowly, like the room is holy ground and he has finally learned how to step carefully. He stops beside her bed. He doesn't touch her right away. His hand trembles, just a little, like his body is still learning how to be honest. He swallows hard, and then he does something that doesn't fit the man he used to be. He kneels, right there. Knee on the cold floor, shirt wrinkled, tie loose, hair still not fully behaving, no boardroom, no press, no shield, just him. Jessica's breath catches, not theatrically, not like a movie. Like a woman who has suffered enough to know that sudden tenderness can be dangerous, too. Matthew speaks with a voice that sounds scraped raw, no polished excuses, no "I didn't know," no attempt to save his image. "I was a rich man," he says, eyes fixed on the floor for a moment, "but I was poor inside." His throat works, struggling. "I let my pride almost kill our son. I let you carry everything alone. And then I got angry at you, because it was easier to blame you than admit I failed." He lifts his face. His eyes are wet in a way he can't control, and that's what makes it real. "I'm not asking you to love me," he says. "I don't deserve that. I'm asking for a chance to earn the right to be here, one day at a time, the right way, the way I should have done from the beginning." Jessica is quiet, and the quiet matters, because she is not a woman who wraps years of pain in a neat bow just to make a man feel better. She looks at him for a long moment, then she extends her hand slowly. Not like a prize, like a boundary and a possibility. "I can forgive you," she says softly, breath still short, voice steady. "But that doesn't erase what I lived." Matthew takes her hand carefully, like it's fragile and sacred, like he understands for the first time that forgiveness isn't the finish line, it's the starting gate. "Then I'll spend the rest of my life honoring that," he says. And for once, it doesn't sound like a speech. It sounds like a vow. Final scene, a simple beginning. Months later, a park, warm sun, a gentle breeze that stirs the leaves like the world is trying to be kind. Nothing looks luxurious, and that's exactly why it's beautiful. Christopher is on a swing, still thin, still healing, but laughing, actually laughing. The kind of laugh that makes your chest ache because you remember when you weren't sure you'd ever hear it again. Matthew stands behind him, pushing slowly at first, careful, almost reverent, like every back and forth is a promise he doesn't want to break. Jessica sits on a bench with a bottle of water beside her. Her breathing still takes intention. Her body still asks for patience. But there's life in her face now, presence. Michael and Joshua run after pigeons and return when they get tired, like kids are supposed to do, wild and safe and messy. Christopher throws his head back and calls out, loud enough for the whole park to hear, "Higher, Dad!" And Matthew obeys, laughing with a sound that isn't practiced. It's just human. Jessica watches them, and for a moment it feels like time returns something that life stole. Not perfectly, not magically, but honestly. Final image, Matthew pushing Christopher on the swing, and Jessica, alive, watching, no longer forced to pretend she's strong every second. Now tell me, truly, when Matthew got down on his knees beside her hospital bed, would you have reached your hand out like Jessica did, or would you need more time? Or maybe you'd never be able to. Write in the comments what you felt in this part. I read every single one because those answers become a safe place for a lot of people here. The first time Christopher ran down a hallway again, it wasn't dramatic. It was almost ordinary. A soft squeak of sneakers on waxed hospital floor, a tiny laugh that startled Jessica so hard she almost dropped the paper cup in her hand. A nurse turned her head like she'd heard something holy in the middle of another Tuesday. And Matthew, who used to move through life like he owned time, just froze, watching his son's small legs carry him forward without a monitor dragging behind him. Christopher stopped at the end of the hall, hands on his hips, chest rising fast. He looked back, grinning like he'd pulled off a magic trick. "See?" he said, breathy and proud. "I can." Jessica swallowed around the lump in her throat. She had learned the hard way that joy could hurt when you didn't trust it yet. Matthew walked to him slowly, like he was afraid to spook the moment. He crouched, meeting Christopher at eye level, and didn't say anything clever. He just held out his hand. Christopher took it without thinking. That was the part that kept pulling Jessica apart in quiet little pieces. The way children could forgive a presence they'd barely known, just because it showed up and stayed. They weren't out of the woods. They were still doing labs, still counting white blood cells, still timing medications, still washing hands until their skin went dry, but the air was different. The crisis had loosened its grip enough to let them feel something else, a future, fragile as it was. Jessica's own recovery came in humbling inches, breathing exercises, physical therapy, a few steps on a good day, a wheelchair on a hard one, and through it all, the steady indignity of being cared for when you've spent years being the caretaker. Some mornings she woke up and couldn't tell if the ache in her chest was medical or emotional. Other mornings, she woke up to the sight of Matthew asleep in that same brutal hospital chair, one arm hooked around a blanket, the other hand still resting on Christopher's bed rail like it was the only thing keeping him grounded on Earth. Once, she watched him stir, eyes still heavy, and whisper to himself, "Not leaving. Not again." He didn't know she heard. Jessica didn't say anything. She just looked away, because if she stared too long, she might do something she wasn't ready to do yet, like soften. The last bit of Ashley didn't arrive like a storm. It arrived like paperwork. One afternoon, while Christopher napped and Michael and Joshua argued softly over a card game at the small family lounge, Rick showed up with a folder so thick, it looked like it had weight. Not just pages. Consequences. He asked Matthew to step into a quiet consultation room down the hall. The walls were painted that calming shade hospitals used to lie to you. The fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. It was the kind of room where you got told things you couldn't unhear. Matthew sat across from Rick without his usual armor. No jacket, no tie, no phone in his hand. Just that visitor bracelet still hanging from his wrist, like a reminder he hadn't earned the right to cut off yet. Rick slid the folder across the table. "We finished the internal audit," he said. His voice wasn't angry. It was tired. "And we pulled the foundation accounts like you asked." Matthew opened it slowly. The pages were organized the way Ashley liked them. Clean headings, neat columns, dates aligned like soldiers. Only now the story those columns told was ugly. Transfers that didn't match donor intent. Vendor payments to companies with no employees. Consulting fees that moved in patterns too neat to be innocent. Emails routed through private servers. A handful of altered approvals logged under Matthew's credentials, approvals he hadn't given. Matthew's jaw tightened. Rick looked him in the eye. She used your signature, she used your access, and she did it for a long time. Matthew didn't flinch like a man offended. He flinched like a man ashamed. As if he could see, in black and white, exactly how much of his life he'd handed over to someone else so he wouldn't have to feel the weight of it. She bribed a nurse, Rick added quietly. We got security footage. Matthew's fingers paused on the page. Rick leaned forward, lowering his voice. And there's more. He slid a second item across the table, a small tablet in a protective case. It came from the pediatric unit, Rick said. One of the nurses found it. It was tagged with Christopher's name. Matthew stared at it like it might bite. He tapped the screen. A video opened. The camera angle was low and crooked, like a child's hand had set it down without caring about composition. The sound was muffled, but clear enough. Jessica's hospital room. Her voice strained. Matthew's voice, tight, suspicious. And then Ashley's voice in the corridor afterward, smooth as silk, gentle as poison. See? Instable. I told you. The video caught the second that Matthew's face changed, not in a cinematic way, but in that small, real way where a person realizes they've been led. Where the body understands betrayal before the mind can put words to it. Matthew watched the clip once, then again. The second time, his eyes didn't blink. When it ended, he sat very still. Rick didn't push. He just let the silence do what it needed to do. Finally, Matthew exhaled, like the breath hurt. She didn't just keep her hands in my world, he said softly. She put them on my children. Rick nodded once. We're ready to press charges, but it has to come from you. Matthew didn't hesitate. Do it, he said. No yelling, no speech, no vengeance. Just the sound of a man choosing consequences after a lifetime of avoiding them. Ashley arrived the next day. Not in a rush, not in panic, in control, as always. She appeared in the hospital lobby in a cream coat that probably cost more than Jessica's rent. Her hair was perfect. Her heels clicked on the floor like punctuation. She carried herself like she still belonged to the place. Matthew met her near the elevators. Jessica watched from a distance, sitting in her wheelchair beside Diane, who held a knitting bag in her lap like it was a weapon of its own kind, quiet, patient, steady. Michael and Joshua hovered behind Jessica, trying to look tough, eyes flicking between Ashley and Matthew like they didn't want to miss anything. Ashley's smile warmed when she saw Matthew, as if this were a misunderstanding they could tidy up with the right tone. There you are, she said softly. I've been calling you all night. We need to talk. Matthew didn't move toward her. He didn't meet her halfway. He simply stood where he was, grounded like something inside him had finally developed roots. You shouldn't be here, he said. Ashley's smile faltered for half a second, then recovered. Matthew, she said gentle, you're exhausted. You've been through trauma. You're not thinking clearly. He held up a folder. Ashley's eyes dropped to it, and something sharpened in her face. What is that? She asked. Your receipts, Matthew said. She laughed lightly, a sound meant to belittle. You're letting that woman poison you, she said, voice still sweet. She's desperate. She has a talent for theatrics. Jessica felt Diane's hand settle on her shoulder, steadying, like an anchor. Matthew's voice didn't rise. "Don't say her name like that," he said. "Not anymore." Ashley's smile cracked, just enough to show the hard underneath. "You really want to do this here?" she murmured. "In a hospital, with people watching?" Matthew turned his head slightly, like he just noticed the truth of that question. And then he did something that made Jessica's throat tighten. He looked toward her. Not for permission, not for approval, for accountability. Jessica didn't nod. She didn't smile. She didn't offer him comfort. She just held his gaze, the way a woman does when she survives something and refuses to pretend it didn't happen. Matthew turned back to Ashley. "Yes," he said. "Here is fine." Ashley's eyes flash. "You're making a mistake." Matthew opened the folder and pulled out a paper. "This is the footage of you offering money to a nurse," he said calmly. "This is the audit trail of your transfers. These are the altered approvals under my credentials. And this," he held up the tablet, "is a child's recording of you manipulating a father while his son was dying." Ashley went still. The lobby seemed to go quieter around them, like the building itself leaned in. Ashley's voice dropped low. "You don't understand what I did for you." Matthew's face didn't harden into cruelty. It softened into something worse for her, clarity. "I understand," he said. "You made my life easy, and you made me a coward." Ashley's eyes narrowed. "I could destroy you." Matthew nodded once, almost as if he accepted that. "Then do it," he said. "I'll still show up for them." For the first time, truly, the first time, Ashley's composure abandoned her. Her mouth tightened. Her breath changed. She looked like someone realizing the door she'd been leaning on was gone. Two security officers approached quietly, guided by a hospital administrator. No spectacle, just procedure. Ashley's gaze snapped to Jessica, and the venom finally surfaced. "You think you won?" she hissed. "You think this ends with a park and a swing and a happy little family?" Jessica's heart beat hard, but her voice stayed calm. "I don't think about you," Jessica said. Ashley blinked, like she'd been slapped. Not because it was loud, but because it was true. The security officers asked Ashley to come with them. She resisted only with posture, lifting her chin like a queen being escorted out of a palace. As the elevator door started to close, she looked at Matthew one last time. "You'll regret this," she said, brittle now. Matthew didn't respond with anger. He responded with something far quieter. "I already regret what mattered," he said. "You were never on that list." The door shut, and the air in the lobby changed, as if a tight band around everyone's ribs had finally loosened. That night, after the boys were asleep, Christopher curled on his side. Still thin but warm, Michael and Joshua sprawled like puppies in the pullout. Matthew found Jessica awake. She was sitting up in the dim light of the hospital room, looking at the city through the window. The skyline glittered, indifferent and beautiful, like it didn't know what it had almost taken. Matthew stood in the doorway for a long moment before stepping in. He didn't come close at first. He didn't assume closeness. "I filed the charges," he said quietly. Jessica didn't look at him right away. "Okay." Matthew swallowed. "I'm not telling you because I want credit," he added quickly. "I'm telling you because I want you to know I won't let her anywhere near you or the boys again." Jessica turned her face toward him. Her eyes were tired, older than her years, but steady. "That's the minimum," she said. Matthew nodded, absorbing it. Not offended, not defensive, just accepting. Then he did something that made Jessica's breath catch. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small plastic bracelet. The hospital visitor bracelet from the first days, the one he'd refused to cut off. He set it gently on the table by her bed. "I kept thinking if I took it off," he said, voice rough, "I'd go back to being the man who could walk away." Jessica stared at the bracelet. Then she looked at him. "Are you going to go back?" she asked. "Plain?" Matthew shook his head once, slow and firm. "No," he said, "but I know wanting isn't enough, so I'm doing the things that don't feel good." Jessica's brows lifted slightly. "Like what?" Matthew exhaled. "Therapy," he said, stepping away from day-to-day operations at the company, putting Rick in charge, making the foundation accounts transparent. Real oversight, real board, real rules. Jessica studied him as if searching for performance, for manipulation, and maybe, for the first time, she didn't find it. Still, she didn't reach for him. She didn't wrap up the past with a ribbon. She only said quietly, "Good." Matthew's throat tightened. "And I'm not moving into your life," he added. "Not unless you ask. I'll be where the boys need me, and where you allow me." Jessica's silence stretched, heavy with years. Then she spoke, soft, but unbreakable. "I'm not giving you a fairy tale," she said. Matthew nodded. "I don't deserve one." Jessica's gaze drifted toward the beds, toward 3 sleeping boys who had no idea how close they'd come to never waking up again. "I'm giving you a schedule," she said. Matthew blinked. Jessica looked back at him. "Pick-up times, doctor appointments, school forms, the boring parts, the parts that don't clap for you?" A sound left Matthew's chest that wasn't laughter and wasn't sobbing, something in between. "Yes," he whispered. "I want the boring parts." Jessica held his eyes for a long moment. Then very slowly, she reached out, not to pull him in, not to soothe him, but to place her hand over the hospital bracelet on the table, a boundary and a beginning. 6 months later, the rain came again, a steady, honest rain, tapping on the roof of a small house Jessica rented on a quiet street that smelled like wet leaves and laundry detergent. The boys were at the kitchen table, bent over homework, arguing about spelling like it mattered more than anything in the world. Christopher's hair had started to grow back in soft, stubborn fuzz. Michael was taller by an inch and acted like it made him a man. Joshua kept cracking jokes until Jessica threatened to take away dessert. The oven timer beeped. Jessica opened it and pulled out a pan of cornbread that wasn't perfect but was real. And then there was a knock at the door. Not a dramatic knock, just a knock. Jessica wiped her hands on a towel and opened it. Matthew stood on the porch, damp from the rain, holding a paper grocery bag in one hand. "I brought the almond milk," he said, a little sheepish. "And the kind of cereal Christopher likes, the one that tastes like cardboard but he insists is healthy." Christopher perked up from the table. "It is healthy!" Matthew grinned, eyes crinkling. "Sure, buddy." Jessica stepped aside to let him in. He didn't stride through the house like a man reclaiming something. He entered like a guest who understood he was being trusted. He took his shoes off without being told. Diane, sitting in the living room with her knitting, looked up and gave him a small nod. Not approval, acknowledgement. Matthew set the groceries down, then glanced at the dining table. "Who's stuck?" he asked. Michael didn't look up. "I'm not stuck." Joshua raised his hand. "He's stuck." Michael shot him a glare. Matthew pulled out a chair and sat at the table. Not at the head, just at the table. He leaned in, reading the worksheet, and for a second the scene was so plain it almost didn't feel like a climax. And that was the point, because the grand gestures were over. What mattered now Was the quiet showing up? Jessica watched him help Joshua sound out a word. Watched Michael pretend not to be relieved. Watched Christopher lean closer like Matthew's presence made the room warmer. She felt her chest tighten. Not with panic this time, not with sickness, with something like release. Matthew looked up and caught her watching. He didn't smile like he'd won. He looked grateful. And Jessica, without thinking too hard, set a plate of cornbread on the table beside him. It wasn't forgiveness wrapped up neat. It wasn't a fairy tale. But it was supper. It was warmth. It was a man learning to be a father in the only way that counts, by staying. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, the house breathed. And for the first time in a long time, Jessica let herself believe this. Some things can be rebuilt, not perfectly, but truly. The rain had finally stopped, but the world still smelled like it had been washed clean. Jessica stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing a plate that didn't really need rinsing. It was an old habit. Keep your hands busy so your heart doesn't run ahead of you. The house was quiet in that late-night way, where every sound feels bigger than it is. In the living room, the boys were asleep in layers. Christopher on the couch with a blanket pulled up to his chin, Joshua half sprawled on the rug like he'd fought sleep and lost, and Michael tucked into the armchair with a book splayed open on his chest like a shield. Matthew moved through the room without waking anyone. No loud steps, no phone, no rushed energy. Just a man learning to be careful with the peace he almost destroyed. He came into the kitchen holding the trash bag. "I'll take it out," he whispered. Jessica nodded, still focused on the plate. A few seconds later, he returned, wiping his hands on a paper towel like he had something important to do and didn't want to mess it up. He hesitated in the doorway, watching her the way a person watches a fire they don't want to get too close to. Then he said, quietly, "Rick called." Jessica didn't look up. "About the foundation?" Matthew nodded. "About Ashley." That made Jessica's hands pause in the water. Matthew's voice stayed low because he could feel how thin the line was between closure and reopening a wound. "The charges are moving forward," he said. "And the board approved the restitution plan." Jessica turned her head just enough to show she was listening. Matthew swallowed. "Every dollar that was misused is being traced and returned. The hospital, the pediatric oncology unit, the families, all of it." Jessica's eyes narrowed slightly, not angry, measuring. "And Ashley?" she asked. Matthew exhaled. "She tried to negotiate. She offered to make it go away if I softened the complaint." Jessica gave a small, humorless laugh. "Of course she did." Matthew's jaw flexed once. "She also tried to send you something." Jessica turned fully now. "To me?" He nodded and reached into his coat pocket, pulled out an envelope. He didn't hand it to her right away. He held it like it had teeth. "It came to the house," he said. "No return address. I didn't open it." Jessica stared at the envelope, and something old tightened in her shoulders. Fear doesn't always look like panic. Sometimes it looks like stillness. Matthew set it on the counter between them, like placing evidence on a table, like he wanted no secrets in this room. Jessica didn't touch it. She didn't have to. Matthew continued, voice steady. "I gave it to Rick." He turned it over to the detectives. Jessica's shoulders loosened by a fraction. "What was in it?" she asked. Matthew's eyes flicked toward the living room, to the sleeping boys, then back to Jessica. "A letter," he said, "and a check." Jessica's mouth tightened. Matthew's voice held no drama, just disgust. "A check big enough to tempt most people into silence." Jessica let out a slow breath, the kind that makes you realize your lungs were holding more than air. "And the letter?" she asked. Matthew looked down for a moment. When he looked back up, his eyes were clear. "She wrote that you were a phase I'd grown out of," he said. "That the boys were an accident she could help me clean up." Jessica's face didn't change much, but Matthew saw the tiny shift like a bruise being pressed. "She told me," Matthew added, "that if I was smart, I'd stop letting you ruin my reputation." Jessica's lips parted slightly as if she might say something sharp, but what came out was quiet. "She doesn't understand what a mother becomes when her child is dying," Jessica said, "and she doesn't understand what it costs to survive the kind of loneliness she caused." Matthew nodded once, his hands clenched and unclenched at his sides. "I told the detectives I wanted it included," he said. "Not for revenge, for record." Jessica looked at him for a long moment. Then she said, "That matters." Matthew stepped closer, careful, not crowding her, just closing the distance enough to be honest. "I needed you to see something," he said, voice rough. "I didn't hide it. I didn't decide for you. I didn't try to protect you with secrets." Jessica stared at the envelope like it was a symbol of the old world, one where decisions were made over her head. She nodded slightly. "Good." Matthew held her gaze. "And there's something else." Jessica's eyes lifted to his. He took a breath like it physically hurt. "I'm not going to ask you to move," he said. Jessica didn't respond right away. The silence wasn't punishment. It was processing. It was the space where boundaries lived. Matthew continued gently. "I bought a place, not far, so the boys can have their routines, their school, their doctors, their normal." Jessica's brow tightened. "You bought a place?" "Yes," he said quickly. "And you don't have to step foot in it. You don't have to go there. I'm not trying to pull you into something you didn't choose." Jessica studied him like she was scanning for manipulation. Matthew didn't rush her. He waited. Finally, Jessica said, "Tell me why." Matthew's throat moved. "Because I learned something," he said. "A real family isn't built by money or proximity. It's built by permission." Jessica's eyes flicked down for a second, then back up. "And what do you think you're permitted to do?" she asked. Matthew nodded slowly, like he'd expected the question. "I'm permitted to show up," he said, "to follow your rules, to be on time, to carry the boring weight, to be dependable even when it doesn't feel rewarding." Jessica's voice stayed calm, but it was firm enough to keep her heart safe. "And you're permitted to leave," she said, "if you ever decide this is too hard." Matthew's face tightened. Jessica's eyes didn't soften. Not because she was cruel, because she was wise. "I need you to hear this," she continued. "Christopher survived. The boys survived. I survived. That means I don't have room for someone who stays only when it's convenient." Matthew swallowed hard. "I know," he whispered. Jessica's voice softened just slightly. Not forgiveness, but humanity. "If you want to be here," she said, "you don't get to be halfway." Matthew's eyes shined, but he didn't make it about him. "I won't be halfway," he said. "Not again." Jessica watched him for a long second. Then she turned off the faucet and dried her hands carefully, like she was choosing her next movement with intention. She walked past him toward the living room. Matthew followed, quiet. They stood together at the doorway, looking at the boys. Christopher shifted in his sleep and mumbled something that sounded like a dream laugh. Joshua snored softly. Michael's fingers still clutched the edge of the book, like even asleep he didn't want to lose control. Jessica's voice was barely above air. "They don't need perfection," she said. "They need consistency." Matthew nodded. "Then I'll be consistent." Jessica turned to him, and in the dim light her face looked older and younger at the same time. Older from what she'd carried, younger because she was finally allowed to breathe. "I'm not promising you a love story," she said. Matthew held her gaze. "I'm not asking for one." Jessica's eyes narrowed, just a touch. "Good." Then she did something small, and it hit harder than any grand gesture. She reached out and adjusted Christopher's blanket where it had slid off his shoulder. Matthew watched her hand move, tender, practiced, and the emotion that rose in his chest didn't look like romance. It looked like reverence. He leaned in slightly, keeping his voice low so the boys wouldn't wake. "I want to ask you something," he said. Jessica didn't look at him. "Go ahead." "If I ever start slipping," Matthew said, "if you ever see me turning into the old man again, tell me. Don't protect me from it." Jessica's jaw tightened, then released. "I won't," she said. Matthew nodded like he'd just been given a job that mattered more than any title. They stood there for another moment, and the quiet felt different now. Not like emptiness, like a room that had finally stopped bracing for impact. Then Jessica spoke, soft but clear. "You can take the boys to their checkup on Tuesday," she said. "I'll go too, but you'll drive." Matthew blinked, almost caught off guard. "Yes," he said quickly. "Of course." Jessica glanced at him. "And, Matthew?" He leaned closer. "Yeah?" Her voice lowered, and it wasn't cruel. It was the truth, spoken with care. "You don't get to buy your way into being their father." Matthew nodded, eyes wet. "I won't," he whispered. "I'll earn it." Jessica held his gaze for one steady heartbeat. Then she turned toward the hallway, exhaustion settling into her posture. "Lock the door when you leave," she said. Matthew's breath caught, because she didn't say, "Don't leave," but she also didn't say, "Go." It was an open space with rules, a beginning with edges. Matthew watched her walk away, then looked back at the boys. He didn't touch them. He didn't wake them. He just stood there for a moment like a man realizing that the greatest thing he'd ever been given was not forgiveness. It was the chance to be better tomorrow than he was today. And in the quiet, he whispered mostly to himself, "Tuesday. I'll be here Tuesday." Then he turned off the living room lamp, leaving only the soft nightlight glowing near Christopher's couch, small, steady, stubborn, like hope. If this story hit you somewhere personal, if you felt that mix of anger and relief and that deep, tired kind of hope, take a second and let me know down in the comments. Would you have set the same limits Jessica set? Or would you have shut the door for good? And if you want more stories like this, stories that feel real, that don't excuse the damage but still believe in rebuilding, make sure you subscribe, turn on the notification bell, drop a like, and share this with someone who needs a reminder that accountability can still lead to healing. Now click the next story on your screen, because the one that's coming might be the one you needed all along.